Disclaimer. The following content may be disturbing to some viewers. Viewer discretion is advised. The story begins during the end of the 19th century in a town in England. The story is of a boy who lived during this era. A party is going on as Miranda meets an acquaintance who says, "Your beauty knows no bounds, Miranda. You've the elegance of a rose." Miranda smiles and says, "Oh my, thank you." Within minutes, the once dance floor full of enthusiastic people became a ground full of corpses as Miranda smirks, saying, "That's right, I am a rose, beautiful, with thorns." Our fun times always come to an end so soon. With a tone of order, Miranda says, "Drain the corpse's blood for me. Did you hear me?" "Rwanda!" A small boy comes running saying, "Yes, mother." Miranda says, "I'm counting on you." As Rwanda comes over and tugs at the hem of Miranda's skirt, he says, "Today is your birthday, isn't it, mother? Would you like to celebrate together?" Miranda instantly hits Rwanda, saying, "Don't touch me. I hate children. If you weren't my own, I would have finished you already." Flashback. Rwanda says, "I'm sorry." Then he says in his mind, "My mother was the world's most evil and wicked murderer at the time, and I was a locked prisoner in the basement. I have never, not even once in my life, been allowed out under the sun. My mother has barely ever talked to me, and I was raised by a babysitter. I managed to gain an education because of that. But the babysitters changed frequently. One day, mother came to meet me and said, 'I have a job that I can only entrust to you.'" Rwanda says in his mind, "The job was to dispose of corpses. I was probably just a tool to my mother, a tool that would work for her, as long as I was given sustenance. I spent most of my time alone with the corpses. That was my everyday life." Present day. As Rwanda finished with the corpses, he heard a gunshot and someone said, "Wait, what are you?" Hearing the sound, he said in his mind, "A gunshot?" So he went over to the side and peeked over and saw some men holding guns as he said to himself, "Who are they?" Then Rwanda saw his mother Miranda's dead body and said as he ran towards her, "Mother!" Just then, one of them says, "Hey, look." Rwanda ran back down as he heard one of them say, "This place has a basement." As the other one said, "Is there anyone still here?" Rwanda says to himself, "What do I do? Mother is, I have to get out of here." As Rwanda came out of that place, he said in his mind, "That was the first time I ever had a thought. I ran without thinking more. I just ran and ran, far away, as far as my legs would take me." As he looked around at the buildings and the cars, Rwanda said, "It's so bright, and there are so many people." Then, as Rwanda sat beside a wall, he said to himself, "I want to rest." Just then, a man came over and said, "Are you all right, boy?" He continues as he smiles, "Why don't you come to my home? I'll get you a nice hot meal." As Rwanda was seated with food on the table in front of him, the man came back and was about to take hold of his hand. Rwanda pushed his hand away as the man said, "How about some thanks? Taught to take orders." Rwanda said, "Thank you." But the next moment, the man said, "You think that'll be enough?" and took hold of Rwanda's hand and dragged him into his room and threw him on the bed. As he undressed Rwanda, he said, "Let's have some fun together, shall we?" The next morning, as Rwanda was eating his food, the man came over and patted him on the head, saying, "You were such a good boy." The other children would cry and scream, "Oh, it was so annoying. But you were nice and quiet. I like that in you. Next time, I'll call over some friends." And as the man was speaking, Rwanda took the fork and poked it into the man's eye. As the man sat on the ground holding his eye, he kept saying, "My eye? He's just a child. Where did he get such strength from?" As the man fell on the ground, Rwanda said with a smirk, "This is my idea of fun, mister." Flashback. Rwanda says in front of a dismembered body, "I found a way to play around down in the basement." When Miranda came and saw the babysitter dead, she said, "You made another friend, I see. I'll have to hire another sitter." As Rwanda said, "Mother," Miranda said, "You're such a good boy, Rwanda." Rwanda says, confused, "Good?" As Miranda said, "You're truly my son." Rwanda replied, "Thank you." Present day. As Rwanda escaped from the man, he stopped at a place and was leaning against a wall as a man walked over and said, "Excuse me, young man. I've seen you standing there for quite a while now. Did you get separated from your mother, perhaps?" Rwanda says, "Yes. I don't think I'll ever see her again." The man says, "Oh, were you orphaned from the war?" Seeing Rwanda is confused, the man says, "Apologies. I forgot to introduce myself. My name is Will. I work at an orphanage." Rwanda says, confused, "Orphanage?" Will says, "Because of the war, a lot of kids have lost their parents, you see. This orphanage was established and paid for by the government. We take on children without any relatives and raise them. You should come if you like. You'll be able to make friends." Rwanda smiles and says, "Thank you." Will introduces, saying, "So, we have a new friend joining us today. His name is Rwanda. Everyone, please make him feel welcome. Okay? All right, dismissed." As Will leaves, Sharia comes over and says, "It's nice to meet you. I'm Chiria. Rwanda says, nice to meet you. Chiria says, you've probably been through a lot, but you can relax here. It's safe, and there are no scary adults. Rwanda says, were you also hurt by adults? Chiria says, yes. As Rwanda looks out of the window, he asks, how many children live here? Chiria says, confused, there are 11 of us. Rwanda was looking at the kids playing on the ground, so he also went down. As he was watching the kids, a fat boy came over and said, you think you're hot stuff, don't you? But you're a newbie, and newbies gotta learn the rules around here. Get him, guys. As Rwanda came back inside, a boy was standing beside the wall and said, were you beaten up by those guys? Rwanda looked at him and said, that's right, the boy says, smirking. Serves you right, and runs off. Seeing Rwanda black and blue, Will says, you look awful. I'll make sure to give them a harsh scolding. Rwanda says, no, it's all right. Rwanda spaces out as he recalls what he did to the fat boy. Seeing Rwanda space out, Will says, Rwanda, if things feel tough or you're feeling sad, it's okay to cry. I just feel like maybe you don't know how to show your feelings all that well. Rwanda says, the only thing my mother ever taught me was how to make a smile. She said, a smile is a mask, Rwanda. Will says, but isn't it painful to hide your feelings? Everyone has a heart, including you. Rwanda says, you're a kind person. Then I guess, maybe I'll tell you. I've lived my whole life alone in a basement. So it's basically like I've never existed. So maybe that's why it seems like I never grew most of those feelings. Seeing Will's shocked face, Rwanda says, just kidding. You're the first person I've ever told this to, Mr. Will. I'll be going now. As Rwanda runs off, Will calls out, Rwanda, you might have lived a really tough life up until now, but you're not alone anymore. You can rely on adults more. As Chiria and Rwanda were seated on a bench in the park, Chiria says, oof, you've got even more bruises. Was it Billy and his gang? Rwanda looks at her and says, everyone is cold to me, but you are still so nice. Why is that? Chiria says, that's because… Just then, the boy from before comes over and says, Chiria, don't hang around with him. Come and play with us. Looking at the boy, Chiria says, Raj, everyone's being too mean to Rwanda. Raj says, everyone just doesn't like his uppity grown-up attitude. Rwanda smirks and says, grown-up? You're one to talk, Raj, when you clearly want some playtime with Chiria. Raj says, screaming, what? You're a rotten piece of fool, you are. Let's go, Chiria. Later that night, as Rwanda lay in bed, he says in his mind, boring. My days at the orphanage were dreadfully boring. This wasn't the life I wanted to live. What I want to do was… Rwanda recalls playing with the corpses. Then as his eyes glimmer, Rwanda says, yes. The next day, Rwanda goes to meet Will and says, hey, Mr. Will? Seeing Rwanda, Will says, hey there, what do you need? Rwanda says, I was wondering, this place is pretty big for so many kids we have here, isn't it? He points to a building on the grounds. Is anyone using the building over on the other side of the fence? Will says, oh, that building hasn't been used for quite some time now, and we're still low on staff. There are still plenty of children on the streets right now. Rwanda smirks, saying, is that so? Will says, what did you want to talk about? Rwanda leaves and meets the fat boy in front of the building. The fat boy says, you reflected some yet? And you didn't have to call me out this late at night to… Rwanda slides a knife, and as the fat boy falls, he says, I'm always imagining these scenes in my head of people dying, of finishing them. This is it. This is the only thing that stimulates me. The next day, Rwanda sees Will running, so he asks, did something happen? Will says, oh, have you seen Billy? Rwanda says, I haven't. Will says, we haven't seen him all morning. We're wondering if he ran away. Rwanda says, he might have. He seemed fed up with life here, and runs off, as Will looks confused and calls out, Rwanda? Rwanda recalls when his mother Miranda asked, my cute little devil, is one enough for you? Rwanda smirked, saying, of course not. As he had finished one girl off, Rwanda's mother Miranda asked, what is it? You said you found something amazing. As kids began to disappear in the town, one man was saying, what's going on? As another one said, why is this happening? Rwanda says in his mind, Mother, children are so simple-minded and weak. It feels like blowing an ant or flying away a little bird. As Rwanda comes back, Chiria says, Natalie's gone missing too. This is so scary. Seeing Rwanda speechless, she says, if you're worried about the other day, it's all right. I don't mind. Rwanda says, thank you. As he says in his mind, everyone is stressed and making a fuss, fearful and sobbing. Is losing really all that scary? As he looks at the corpses, he says, this makes 9. All that's left is me, Chiria, and Raj. Meanwhile, out on the streets, a group of men and women had formed a patrolling team. One of them says, it's an irregular type of serial killer who aims for children. One of them says, we are patrolling at night. Another man says, they show up at night, so we should patrol at night. As another one says, when are the police coming? How can they just leave a murderer at large like this? The first one says, we've already set up patrols and watches. What more can we do? As they ask Rwanda, he says in his mind, the adults are incompetent. They believed my words. Rwanda tells them there was a tall man. Just then, Raj comes yelling, "Rwanda, it's you. You're the culprit." Rwanda says, "That hurts. I'm scared too, you know." Raj says, "You liar. Chiria told me. She said she saw the shadow of someone on the other side of the fence at night. And then when she went to go to tell you, you weren't anywhere to be found?" Rwanda says, "Chiria, I'm so sad that you'd suspect me. You talked to Raj about it, right?" Chiria says, "I'm sorry." Rwanda says, "I know everything. I know that you are the criminal. You're not an orphan. You set fire to your own home. You killed your family." Chiria asks, shocked, "How did you?" Rwanda says, "I asked. Our good friend Will told me." Chiria says, crying, "No, I had no choice." Rwanda says, "Chiria, you and I might be more similar than we think. I can soothe the wounds of your heart. In return, will you lend me your strength?" Chiria looks at Rwanda, who kisses her as Raj enters the room. So Raj runs off and meets Will. Will gets shocked as he says, "Rwanda is the culprit?" Raj says, "I'm sure of it. There are definitely corpses over at the other building." Will says, getting confused, "Hold on a minute. You're sure of it, which means you haven't actually seen it, right? The other staff members." Raj says, "I haven't told them. Only you, Will. I thought you'd be the one most willing to hear me out." Will says, "I see. The other building should have been locked, but I guess I'll take a look." As Will opens the door, he sees Rwanda and says, "So this is where you were. Rwanda, were you listening?" Rwanda says, "No? What were you talking about?" Will turns and runs out saying, "Nothing you need to worry about." As Will runs off, Rwanda takes hold of Raj and says, "It's your own fault. It's time for lunch." As Raj was about to freak out, Rwanda points to the clock, so Raj says, "So what?" Rwanda says, "You two are the only ones who haven't eaten yet. What a shame. Today's menu was filled with poison." Raj says, "No, you can't have." As Rwanda begins to laugh, they faint at the table. Just then, Will comes running back. As he opens the door, he says, "What an awful smell." On opening the door, Will says, "No, was it true?" On seeing the corpses, he falls onto his knees and says, "No." Just then, Raj yells, "Will, come back, everyone! Rwanda, he's a demon!" Just then, he hears a loud bang and sees Chiria coming as she says, "Raj!" Seeing Chiria, Raj says, "Chiria, thank you, you're safe." Chiria says, "We have to run while we can. Rwanda's trying to kill us too." Raj calls out again, "Will." Will says, "I know, let's go." As Will was crying near the window, Rwanda comes and says, "Were you surprised? Chiria set the fire for me." Will says, "Did you kill everyone?" Rwanda says, as he points a gun towards Will. "That's right." As he shoots, Rwanda says, "I don't like guns." As he uses his knife, Rwanda says, "Yes, feeling the sensation is absolutely the best." But Will manages to gain some strength and pushes Rwanda, saying, "You mustn't pile on more sins." Rwanda says, "What are you doing?" Will says, "I am your ally. You may have made a mistake, but it's not too late. End it all here." Rwanda pushes him, saying, "What's wrong with you? I'm a villain here." Will retaliates, saying, "No, you're not. No one in this world is born a villain. This world, we were the ones who made you into one. We adults are at fault. I'm so sorry, Rwanda, but I truly wish to save you. I want to help you, support you. I care for you, truly and earnestly. Please believe me that humans like me exist." Rwanda's eyes begin to well up as he says, "It's too late," as he uses his knife on Will. As Rwanda was walking away with tears in his eyes, Will says before falling, "If you feel the weight of your sins, then wear them." A scene of the future flowing out from their minds. As Rwanda and a boy enter a seemingly tranquil place, the boy says, "Are you sure this was okay? Just coming in without permission?" Rwanda says, "It's fine. The lady never really comes here either." "Did you bring your treasure?" The boy says, "Yup. This is my most prized possession." The boy opens the locket saying, "This here's my mom. She already passed away though." Rwanda says, looking at her photo, "What a beautiful person." The boy says, "Isn't she? Now it's your turn." Rwanda says, "Yup," as he pulls the cover off. "My most prized possession is," as the boy looks shocked, "this," Rwanda says, "Isn't it beautiful?" On seeing what's inside the bottles, the boy runs out saying, "Murder," as Rwanda calls out, "Hey, hold up. I just wanted to get along is all. Those people weren't even killed by me." Just then, a fat lady named Sylvie comes, saying, "Why is there some random child in our house?" "Well, Rwanda?" On seeing Sylvie, Rwanda says, "Miss Sylvie." Sylvie says, "What did I say about bringing folks inside the house?" Rwanda says, "But we were talking in town and got along well. We could have been friends. Even though you didn't know him, you didn't have to finish him." Sylvie hits Rwanda, saying, "Silence. Probably dug up another brat from the slums, I'm sure. Don't get cheeky with me. Something like you doesn't need things like friends. Understand?" As Rwanda hits the wall, Sylvie continues, "Remember who gave you a home to live in when you had nowhere to go. If it weren't for me, you would be lying dead or dying somewhere, just like this brat. But you're not, thanks to my generosity. From now on, if you bring anyone else here, it won't end with just a beating. If you understand, hurry up and dispose of him." Rwanda says, "Yes, ma'am." As Rwanda was slicing, he came across the locket of of the boy's mother, so he puts it in his pocket. As Rwanda was seeing the bottles, he says, "I don't need things like friends. I caused that incident in the other town. I took the valuables and escaped to this town. It was at that time that I met Sylvie. In exchange for the valuables, I asked that she would let me stay at her home." As Rwanda lay in the middle of the forest, he says, "No one has any idea. Right under here, there's a buried corpse. I'm the only one who knows." Just then, a girl comes who scares Rwanda. "Who? Why are you here?" The girl says, "Why? Well, so that I can bury this bunny." Rwanda says, "Why not just throw it in the river?" The girl says, "Isn't that terrible? It should be returned to the forest." Rwanda says, "So that means you have to bury it here?" The girl says, "That's right." Rwanda says, "But this is my spot." The girl says, "The forest belongs to everyone." Then Rwanda sees the girl lick the rabbit's wound. So he says, "What are you doing?" The girl says, "I'm making a connection. With this, its death has been repaid." Rwanda says, "One more question. Who killed it?" The girl asks, confused, "Who killed it?" Rwanda says, "Yes, it's covered in scratches, so it didn't die of old age. But those wounds aren't the bites of an animal. Those wounds are from a knife." Rwanda was about to stab the girl as she says, "It was me. I was the one who killed it." Rwanda stops as the girl turns around saying, "Strange you aren't surprised at all. I thought for certain you would be like Papa, Mama, and the others. Everyone thinks I'm creepy and weird." Rwanda says, "I'm pretty used to corpses." The girl says, "And killing too? Are you?" As Rwanda looks on quietly, the girl says, "I was taught how to hunt by an acquaintance a long time ago, so I've done it ever since. Only animals, though. What I did today was part of my hunting hobby." Rwanda says as they both sit down, "Let me hear more about you and your stories." Rwanda says, "Just a hunch, but I have a feeling that we might be more similar than we think." The girl says, "I live in London, actually. I just happened to come to this town by chance. My papa is a doctor for people's thoughts and my mama is kind and loving. But they don't like the things I do. They say, 'Don't you feel guilty?' and such. And when I honestly answered no, they became very angry with me and told me I was strange, weird, and not right. Since they told me it was so horrible, I started reading a bunch of psychology books, but I didn't find the answers I was looking for. That's why I gave up. I decided to hide the real me. But not being accepted for who I really am, it hurts a lot." Recalling the boy and Sylvie, Rwanda says, "But you're not strange." The girl says, "That's the first time I've ever been told that. Thank you." "Oh, but enough about me. Won't you tell me about yourself? I'd love to hear." Rwanda says, "I'm..." Flashback. Rwanda yelling, "Let me out." Miranda says, "I can't let you out." Rwanda says, "Why not?" Miranda says, "Because you don't exist in this world." Seeing the corpse, "You finished another one? How many does that make? I'll have to hire another sitter, won't I?" As Rwanda says, "Another?" Miranda says, "But I must admit you've grown up. Good boy." Rwanda. Present day. The girl says to Rwanda as he's lost in thoughts, "Are you okay?" Rwanda says, "Yes. I'll share my story some other time. I need to get going." The girl says, "Oh, all right. Let's meet again then." As they shake hands, Rwanda tells his name, Rwanda. The girl says, "Rwanda, you can call me Makalo." Rwanda says, "See you, Makalo." As Rwanda was humming Makalo's name, Sylvie yelled, "Why did you take so long? Where in the world did you go?" Rwanda says, "Miss Sylvie." Just then the door opens as a voice says, "Now, he was just out for a bit. There's no need to be so angry, is there?" Rwanda turns around to see it's a soldier who says, "Aren't you being a little too strict on the boy, Sylvie?" Sylvie says, "If you say so, Mr. Midwinter." Midwinter gets on his knees in front of Rwanda and says, "Sylvie says you're up for assisting me with a very important job, and I hear you're used to jobs like these." Rwanda says, "Corpses are my friends, so..." Midwinter laughs, saying, "What a funny thing to say, this boy." Sylvie says, "Yes, he is a bit of an odd one." Midwinter says, "I'm sorry it's so sudden, but I want you to come with me to London right away." Rwanda says, "Right this moment?" Midwinter says, "There's a new job that I'd like to entrust to you. You don't mind, right?" Sylvie says, "Not at all." As she hits Rwanda, "Well, come on then. Get your things and get going. Hurry up." Rwanda sees he's been sold to Midwinter by Sylvie. Upon arriving in London, as they approach a house, Midwinter says, as he opens the door, "Please come in." As they enter, Rwanda sees a gift on the table. Midwinter says, "A present from me. Go ahead and open it." As Rwanda opens the box, he sees new clothes, so he says, "What kind of job is this?" Midwinter says, smiling, "A job I think will be rather easy for you. I see great potential in you, although that's just my intuition." Meanwhile, over at an opera, Makalo was with her parents, as her mother says, "This is your first time here, isn't it, Makalo?" Makalo says, "Yup, I'm excited." Makalo's father says, "I'm sure you'll be surprised." As Makalo was coming out with her parents, her mother says, "It was so touching, I cried." Makalo's father says, "How sensitive you are, Iria." Makalo, "Did you have fun?" Makalo says, "Yes, Papa." Just then, Makalo sees Rwanda, so she runs off to him, as her father calls out, "Makalo!" Seeing Rwanda, Makalo says, "Rwanda, I'm so happy to see you again. Where's your mama and papa?" Rwanda says, We got separated, as Makalo was saying. Oh, really? Her parents came running from behind as her father said, Makalo, you shouldn't run off like that. Makalo says, yes, Papa. Seeing Rwanda, Makalo's father says, do you know this child? Makalo says, he said he got separated from his mama and papa. Makalo's mother says, oh dear. Makalo's father says, we'll send you home tomorrow, so come stay at our place tonight. Rwanda insists, saying, oh no, I couldn't. As Makalo says, it's completely fine. Come on. Rwanda smiles, saying, thank you. As Makalo and Rwanda were sleeping, Rwanda gets a nightmare of Will saying, did you finish everyone? End it all here. It's not too late for you. As Rwanda sees pity in Will's eyes, he says, are you pitying me? Don't look at me with those eyes. As Rwanda wakes up, he realizes he's bare and his hands are handcuffed. Just then, he hears footsteps. As Makalo's parents enter, Makalo's father says, you didn't need to wake up just yet. As Rwanda looks at them confused, he says, what are you going to do to me? Makalo's father says, we are going to have a very fun time, my boy. Rwanda says, you're not going to hurt me. Makalo's father says, not if you're a good boy and behave. Makalo's mother says, I like it most when they cry and scream. Makalo's father says, because then they have an excuse to speed up the festivities to silence them, right? You just love the killing part. Makalo's mother says, oh no, but I believe you ended up finishing the last child. Makalo's father says, did I now? Makalo's mother says, how many have you finished off? They pause for a moment, then Makalo's father says, looking at Rwanda, with you four, all of them wetting their pants like little babies before they finished off. Rwanda smirks, saying, what? So only 3 people, huh? Meanwhile, as Makalo wakes up, she comes out of her room calling, Rwanda? Mama? Papa? As Makalo's father steps forward, he says, what's wrong? Aren't you scared? You seem awfully calm about this. Rwanda says, calm? Makalo's father says, what was that? Rwanda says, I was just imagining it all. What the both of your, as he grabs hold of Makalo's father, bodies will look like. Makalo's father shoots, but he ends up shooting his wife. As he holds his wife, Rwanda strikes on Makalo's father's head with his handcuff chain, strangling him. As Rwanda opens his handcuffs, he says, the key. The father was probably holding on to it. Then, as he sees Makalo's father on the bed, he says, truly, just like a little baby wetting your pants while you finished him off. As Rwanda was about to leave, he says, I have a good idea. Just then, Makalo comes down to the basement and sees her parents and cries out, no! Just then, she notices Rwanda behind her, who says, I really didn't want to kill you, but as Rwanda finishes her off, he also licks her blood, and then, as he feels a connection, he says, so it's like that, huh? As he holds the medicine, he says, I got the medicine for the mission, but I wonder what Midwinter needs this for. Well, not like it has anything to do with me. Makalo, I noticed something thanks to you. When you take in another person, a true bond is formed between you. As Rwanda comes out, he says, with this, will I no longer be lonely, since you and I were able to become one? Meanwhile, back in the basement, Makalo calls out, someone help me. Back when Rwanda was getting ready to come to Makalo's home, he asked, why do I need to finish them? Midwinter says, it's simple, really. Their existence has become a hindrance. Please meet me back here once you're finished. I'll pray for your success. As Rwanda comes back and places the bottle on the table, a boy shouts out saying, blimey, you're slow. I'm done. Tired of waiting. As Rwanda says, who? The boy says, name's Ivan. Mr. Midwinter told me to come here, to take you back with me. As Rwanda says, he did? He says in his mind, this guy. I didn't sense his presence whatsoever. Ivan says, that's right. You the newbie, ain't you? Rwanda scoffs, saying, the newbie? Ivan says, well, nice to meet you. You want a swig of this? Rwanda says, I'm fine. Ivan says, that's so, even though I got it as a gift. Rwanda says, the brat with the cap made his way in here. Just then, Ivan says, yikes, as a man enters, saying, goddamn brat, you thief. As Ivan says, this? Huh? Rwanda says, so it wasn't a present. Ivan says, my mistake. The man says, you brat, helping yourself to the shop. As the man tries to grab Ivan, he says, you fool, I'm gonna drag you to the police. Just then, Ivan smashes the bottle on the man's head, saying, I already drank it, you bloody fool. Then Ivan grabs Rwanda's hand and runs out. Then he runs, holding Rwanda's hand, and then after stopping at a place, he removes the valuables, saying, oh ho, lucky, it's always worth doing down the rich street, I tell you. Rwanda says, you don't look particularly well off. Ivan says, not now, sure, but someday I'll make a fortune. You also came into this line of work for the sake of money, didn't you? Rwanda says in his mind, what on earth is he talking about? This guy. Then he says to Ivan, I don't know what you're going about. This is just natural progress. Ivan says, that's so? Well, I don't give a care about what you do either way. I'm guiding you, because I got paid to. The world's about money. Money. It's the most important thing for staying alive, you know? Rwanda says, money's not the only important thing out there. Ivan scoffs, saying, what's that I'm a proper lad attitude? I'm gonna puke. That's enough, keep quiet and come with me. As Rwanda resists, Ivan says, I said come with me, didn't I? Rwanda says, I hate your type of personality. Ivan says, got a scary look in your eye. Whatever will I do, I wonder? Just then, Rwanda notices as Ivan shows, holding his knife in the bottle. You looking for these? Should I give back your knife? Yeah, that was my bad. You don't gotta get so angry. I'll return it here. Just then, a boy comes attacking Rwanda as Ivan says, Oi, you alright? The boy yells out, Damn you, come here. I'm looking for you. 'Cause Mr. Midwinter told me to. I was wondering what kind of guy you were, not anybody like this? Rwanda sees he's bleeding. Damn, my head. The boy says, listen up. I was born in these slums, and I'm willing to do everything and anything for the sake of staying alive. I didn't have some fancy, well-to-do upbringing like you did. If you get that, then shut up and come with. You proper lad. As the boy brings Rwanda to the bar, Rwanda says, What is this place? Who are you people? A man says, This place is led by Mr. Midwinter. It's a shit heap where scums gather. That said, we are the worst of the worst hitmen, Rwanda says, looking around, a hitman organization. Ivan says, they've been hearing a new guide be showing up. As some men began to fight, one man gets up and says, That's about enough, now quit fighting. The boss has arrived. Midwinter says, Thank you, everyone. Rwanda, thank you very much as well. Thank you, Ivan. Ivan says, Hey, Mr. Midwinter, you really sure about this guy? Midwinter says, I am. The boy's a diamond in the rough. Ivan scoffs, Ha, this brat? Midwinter says, You're the brat here, Ivan. As Midwinter gives Ivan the money, he says to Rwanda, Now, if you could hand me what we discussed. Ivan removes the bottle, saying, Do you mean this thing? This baby's gonna cost extra. Midwinter says, Well, I guess it's fine. Zoe. As Zoe says, Yes. Midwinter says, I want you to train the boy. Zoe says, Train such a weak-looking kid? Just why are you backing him this much? Midwinter says, Because that child is one who will change the world. Zoe says, You dodged the question. Midwinter says, Well, I'm trusting you. As Midwinter leaves, Zoe says to Rwanda, What's your name, kid? Lavender or something? Rwanda replies, Rwanda. Zoe says, Ah, right? Come on now, Lavender. He looks towards Rwanda. Where's your reply, Rwanda? Rwanda says, Yes. As Zoe brings Rwanda into the basement, he takes hold of Zoe and pins him to the ground, making Zoe say, You copied me. Rwanda says, I'm able to remember most things if I see them. Please show me your techniques. Zoe says, Ain't this a laugh? Meanwhile, Ivan comes over and says, Why is he the only one getting special treatment? Damn, it pisses me off. Maybe I should beat the hell out of him again. Just then, Rwanda grabs hold of his ear as he screams, Rwanda, stop. Number I give. If it's about the drug money, I'll give it back. Forgive me, Rwanda says, pinning him down. Money? I don't care about the money. You called me a spoiled rich boy before, didn't you? I am not a spoiled rich boy. Zoe comes over saying, That's enough of that. Then he says to Rwanda, Now look, Ivan is a member, all right? You don't kill members of the organization. Do you get what I'm saying? As Rwanda says, Ruined it. Seeing Zoe confused, Rwanda says, It was just getting good. You ruined the fun. Finishing him would have been so great. Zoe goes to meet Midwinter, who says, Is what he said? Zoe says, He's bad news, I'm telling you. Midwinter says, As expected, he has talent. Seeing the bottle, Zoe says, What the hell is that anyway? Midwinter says, To put it simply, it's medicine. But the effects are rather amazing. It's a real miracle of a drug. What people hate and dread the most in this world is pain and fear. And this drug makes it all disappear, like a sigh from an angle. But after that, all that waits for them is an unimaginable, inescapable hell. They'd entrust themselves to the devil himself for the sake of obtaining the drug. They'll hand over everything they have until they die. Understand? In other words, whoever obtains control over this medicine controls the people. No, the entire world. Meanwhile, Ivan says, It's frustrating, but I was really surprised. Overnight, just like that. Damn it, what even are you? Rwanda says, If Zoe hadn't stopped me, I would have most definitely finished you. Ivan says, It's not like I don't have times where I go overboard, but I feel like there was something off about you. Like there's something dwelling inside you. Just as Rwanda thinks Ivan is up to something, he says, Do you keep a cat or something? Rwanda says, You really don't have anything going on inside there, huh? Ivan says, What do you mean? I'll beat you. Rwanda says, Come to think of it, I remember you saying money is everything. But what will you do with it once you have it? Ivan says, I hate the current gap. I hate those upper-class pricks. The wealthy treat poor folk like they're slaves, you know, Rwanda says. But right now, you're pretty much Midwinter's slave, aren't you? Ivan says, That's why. That's my current story, ain't it? But I'll get out of here someday. Rwanda says, This world has always been survival of the fittest. Lives are taken by the strong. Ivan says, What about you? You said you came here with the flow, or something like that, right? You just gonna keep on doing that? For the rest of your life? Rwanda says, I have a few goals, like meeting my mother again. Ivan says, Okay, family? They're alive? Rwanda says, Probably. Ivan says, That's so? So if you meet her, where do you go from there? Rwanda says, that mother of mine wouldn't die like that. That's the next day, as Zoe was teaching, he says, we are different from your everyday thugs. You need to learn and be knowledgeable. Ivan says, why do I gotta be here? Rwanda says, because you forgot things right away. Later on, as Rwanda was learning the notes, he says, I already know all this. Then, Rwanda had a fight class as well. As they were practicing, Zoe says, all right, take a break. You are more diligent than I took you for. Rwanda says, I never learned hand-to-hand combat, so Zoe says, so you're absorbing all of it. How frightening. 1 month later, Zoe says, this is the extent of what I can teach you. Midwinter says, sorry to cram it all in a short period of time. Hope a lot of it stuck. Sometime later, I'll give you both a test. Look forward to it. Rwanda says, a test? What do you mean by that? Ivan says, me too? Midwinter says, I have a request I was considering taking on, but Rwanda, I think we should use it as your final exam. If you perform well, I'll admit you as an official member of the organization. Rwanda says in his mind, so he doesn't find me trustworthy yet, is that it? Ivan says, oi, wait a second. You were testing the both of us. I got nothing to do with this. I'm already a member, damn it. Zoe says, the two of you are a package deal, since you're good friends. As both Rwanda and Ivan look shocked, Midwinter says, exactly. Meanwhile, as the boys are in their room, Ivan says, damn, those total foolheads. Rwanda says, they probably don't think you've learned anything. Ivan says, everyone thinks I'm stupid. Damn, I'm pissed. Fine, if this is how it's gonna be, time to binge drink. Rwanda says, by binge drinking, you meant juice, not booze, huh? Such a child. Also, can't you sit properly? Treat that table a little nicer. Ivan says, shut up. Are you my mom? As Rwanda says, gross. Stop sitting everywhere. A knock gets the doorman's attention. As he opens the door, a lady enters with a child. The doorman says, yo, it's been a while, hasn't it? What's up? As May enters, she says, sup? Yvonne says, ah, if it ain't May. As Rwanda says, who? As Ivan hugs May, she says, oh, you got bigger again, didn't you, Ivan? Ivan says, you ain't changed a bit, May. Been 3 years, hasn't it? Just then, Zoe comes, saying, you, what are you doing back here? You left and got married to that Denise Liddy or whoever. May says, what am I doing here? I came back here for a job, of course, Zoe. Zoe says, a job? You have some nerve. Then May says, hey now, introduce yourself, Kevin. Zoe says, what's with the kid? May says, Denise has been busy, so I'm taking care of him right now. Zoe says, but you can't just. As Kevin was on the brink of crying, May says, it's all right, ain't it? Since we're comrades and all. Zoe says, you'd never listen no matter what we say anyway. Ivan asks Kevin, oi, you ever eaten a rat, kid? Seeing all this, Rwanda says to himself, what's with these people? They understand what kind of organization this is, right? Just then, he sees May hugging Kevin and feels an ache in his heart. What? My chest. Just then, May notices Rwanda and says, you are the new guy. Name's May. Nice to meet you. Ivan says, ah, that guy's Rwanda. And he's a damn conceited lad, too. May says, ah, he does look like one. May says, Zoe, got a minute? You too, Kevin. Zoe says, so that's not your kid? May says, Denise turned out to be infertile. Zoe says, still, why'd you... May says, you're gonna ask, why'd you take on something like a kid, and that he's baggage? Zoe says, that's not what I'm saying. May says, I don't care what anyone says. I think of this child as my own. Sure, we might not be related by blood or anything, but what's important is how I feel in your heart. I feel the same way with you guys. This place is my home, and the organization members are my loving family. Zoe says, that part of you hasn't changed even after 3 years. May smiles, saying, oh, that's right. We should go say hi to Bacchus. He's still in charge here, right? Wonder if he'll be surprised to see Kevin. His surprised face is hilarious. Zoe says, May, listen, Bacchus isn't here anymore. The head changed right after you left. May says, shocked. What? Zoe says, the new head's now a man by the name of Midwinter. May says, what? Minestrone? What happened to Bacchus? He wouldn't let go of the organization that easily. Zoe says, he's dead. May says, if that's a joke, I'm not laughing. Zoe says, have I ever been one to tell jokes? I know you were close to Bacchus, so I didn't really want to tell you. Also, Midwinter isn't here now. You can greet him next time. May recalls Bacchus saying, Bacchus died? Kevin says, May. Looking at Kevin, May says, oh, right, shall we go? Midwinter. What kind of person could he be? Meanwhile, Zoe meets his informer, who says, what I just told you's worth about this much, wouldn't you say? As Zoe turns to leave, all right, I get it. Let me know if you hear anything else. Every detail. I'm counting on you. The informer says, yeah, I got you. Later that night, Rwanda thinks in his mind. Zoe said, Ivan's our comrade. May said, the organization members are my loving family. What's all that about? I'm gonna be sick, especially those two, May and Kevin. They're the most sickening lot I've ever seen. Guess I'll get rid of them. All I have to do is erase anyone that disturbs me. As Rwanda goes to look for them, he says, not here either. Where could they be? Finally, he finds May and Kevin fast asleep. As Rwanda was about to strike, he says in his mind, "If you lost what's important to you, what kind of face would you make, I wonder? I guess I'll finish the child first." But as Rwanda was about to strike Kevin, May wakes up and struggles with Rwanda as she pins Rwanda on the ground, saying, "Why were you aiming for Kevin? What were you planning to do?" Seeing Rwanda's face, May says, "I asked what you were planning to do." Rwanda got teary-eyed as he says, "I don't know. When I saw you two, my chest got all tight. I'm sorry, I won't do it again." May leaves Rwanda's hands and says, "Ah, well, hurry up and get back to bed. Do it again, and you won't get off so easy next time." As Rwanda comes out, he says, "Naive. So naive. You won't get off so easy next time? That's my line. Because next time, you'll be first, May." Rwanda says, "You called for me? What is it?" Midwinter says, "The other day, did you get in a fight with May Glickman?" As Rwanda says in his mind, "Looks like it's out of the bag." He says, "Just a small dispute." Midwinter says, "I can overlook small disputes. However, if you were seriously aiming to finish one of our members, that is a different conversation entirely." Rwanda says, "What? Is that what he told you?" Midwinter says, "Indeed it is." Rwanda says, "And you believe him? Do you really think I would try to finish him?" Midwinter says, "I do. Or rather, I expected that it would be a possibility. You're similar to an acquaintance of mine, free and capricious, like a cat that lashes out at anything if it does not care for. And I suppose my prediction was on the mark. You look like you have something you want to say. Go ahead, say it." Rwanda says, "Then, since it's come to this, I'll tell you. I heard that this was a hitman organization, but it's actually just a bunch of thugs playing house. I have to say it's a bit of a letdown, and I'm honestly very disappointed by it." Midwinter says, "You don't say. Then exactly what kind of organization were you hoping for?" Rwanda says, "A place where I can freely do what I want. A place where any kind of murder is justified, and my allies would allow it, regardless of who it is." Midwinter says, "However, you don't seem to understand what it means to be a hitman. What do you think the difference is between a hitman and a murderer?" Rwanda says, "Aren't they the same? They both are villains." Midwinter says, "That's quite the utopia there. Very nice. I like it when you're honest. The truth is, they're completely different. Let me tell you how. Hitmen remove their targets, and only their targets, according to a contract they've established with someone. On the other hand, murderers simply hurt people in order to fulfill their own desires and impulses. So, as long as you are here, you must act as a proper hitman." Rwanda says, "Is that so?" He beats around the bush every time. Midwinter says, "The current members have been trained by their predecessors and are easy to control. You are charismatic. True. That's why I have much interest in you. However, if I let you do as you like and bring down this organization, I'd be very troubled. Understand? The organization and you are my property. So could you do me a favor and stop acting however you please?" Rwanda says, "Property? I refuse. I will be the one who decides how I choose to act." As Midwinter was about to attack, Rwanda counterattacks, but fails as Midwinter grabs him, slapping him. As Rwanda sat on the floor with a chain around his neck, he says to himself, "Damn, what just happened? It happened so fast I missed it all." Midwinter says, "Look at me. All right, listen well, property. Property does not speak up to their human masters. It's important to this organization that you have the loyalty of a dog. You do not require the freedom of an alley cat. It appears that your mother raised you rather softly. My discipline will not be as nearly as kind as hers," Rwanda says, shocked. "Mother?" As Midwinter says, "If you understand." Rwanda says, "Why do you know about it? Do you know my mother?" Midwinter says, "And yet you're still opening your mouth. Please do not make me have to repeat myself. I'm disappointed in you. I thought you were more clever than this. Right. Just this once, we'll skip your meals and have you spend some time in a cell. Then I'll forgive you. Do you understand? You cannot win against me. So do take care not to get into any more trouble. Burn it clearly into your mind." Later in the day, Rwanda says to himself, "Midwinter, seems I need to find out more about him. Moreover, he knows my mother. Right, I need to think about May too. This is good. I'll come up with a plan to kill him while I'm stuck here. Back then, he showed me his strength when he tried to protect that weak brat. Does protecting others act as a source of strength? Or is it a weakness? Bonds with others." Again, Rwanda's chest tightens as he says, "Not again. Like I'm suffocating. I still don't get it. But it's important that I try to understand, to be able to read May's thoughts and actions and accomplish my goal of finishing them. Everything's for my goal. If I can accomplish that, it will all be worth it." Just then, at a house, someone shouts, "Robber!" The maid comes running and helps the man, saying, "Sir, are you all right? Did you get injured?" The man says, I'm quite all right, but the safe..." Over at a hideout, a gang officer says, showing the treasure, "There we go." Gang boss Matthews says, "Well done, Build." Build says, "It's another big hit." We made the right choice making this mansion our hideout. Everyone still thinks this place is completely closed up. Just then, the maid knocks and says, "Excuse me, I've brought your meal." Seeing only one serving, Bild says, "For one person? Where's my portion?" The maid says, "Excuse me, I didn't realize you were present." Bild was going to slap the maid as he says, "Wench, I'll finish ya." But he doesn't slap and says, "I'll hold back after all. It's been a good day today. I won't hit you." "That's a good look for you too." Miliarna, over at the bar, Ivan says, "Just where did you go off to last night? Not that I was worried or nothing. You want me to take your bed for myself? You listening?" "Hey." Seeing Rwanda is not speaking, Ivan says, "Hey oi, say something." Rwanda says, "Just shut up. I don't feel like speaking." Ivan says, "What you acting like that for? It ain't cute, you know, that rich lad act." As Rwanda chokes on his food, Ivan says, "That's what happens when you ignore people." Rwanda says, "You just never learn your lesson, do you? Do you want me to beat you half to death again?" Ivan says, "Oh, come at me anytime. I still ain't completely accepted you here after all." Just then, some men were reading the paper as one of them says, "Seems they've done it again." Another one says, "Talking about today's headline? I think today's meeting's about them too." Just then, May enters and walks over to the boys and says, "Take a break, you two." Ivan says, "But he started it." May says to Rwanda, "Hey, I'm not upset about before anymore, so let's let it go, shall we? It's all water under the bridge now, okay?" As Rwanda looks away, May says to herself, "Shoot, I really treated him too harshly for a kid, didn't I?" Then Rwanda smiles, saying, "Yeah." Ivan says, "You weren't around last night, so you got no idea how sad. If you beg me, guess I have to now." As May says, "No thank you. We're going to raid the gang that's been in the papers lately. Nothing more than that, though. We were just hired to walk in, clean up the mess, and walk out." Later that day, Midwinter has a secret meeting with his gang and says, "If you've been reading the morning paper, you probably already know the gist of it. This meeting is related to the Matthews gang, who have recently become a hot headline. Our client is a rival gang of theirs. This job will also be a good test for you two. We'll use a particular route. I've discovered the location of their hideout. For this request, our objective is the extermination of the whole gang and the assassination of Boss Matthews. Even if the operation ends in failure, the contract is considered fulfilled, as long as we are able to deal great damage to the gang. The plan's designed to make profit for the client's gang. Midnight, 3 days from now, we'll create a scene near their hideout. The gang's underlings will come to investigate. While security is spread thin, we'll launch a surprise attack on their hideout. The hall where the underlings were will be empty so we can break through to the inside. After that, we'll divide into teams A, B, and C. Team A will be led by May. You'll clear out any remaining underlings or any that return along the side entrances. Team B will be led by Zoe. You'll be targeting Matthews and his personal security in the central area. I'll be accompanying you. Team C will be Rwanda and Ivan. You'll work with Team B until halfway. Then, the two of you will come and defeat Matthews' right-hand man. Ivan says, "So, I'm going to be stuck with him after all?" Midwinter says, "Well, I said I was going to test the both of you, didn't I?" Ivan says, "That might well be the case for him, but I'm not happy with this one bit." May says, "Ivan, you're not going to get anywhere pouting about it." Rwanda says, "Hold on. The right-hand man's by himself, right? I could take him out alone." Midwinter says, "Well, that right-hand man is a giant referred to as a monster in the underworld. I'd be concerned about you going alone. I don't want you to die on your first job after all. If you cause any problems, I'll be very upset with you." Rwanda says to himself, "I see how it is, so Ivan's acting like a supervisor for me." Midwinter says, "So I would like to have your cooperation with this, Ivan. If it's about the reward, I'll increase yours. How's that sound?" Ivan says, "I can't say no when you're asking so nicely, now can I?" Midwinter says, "Good boy." Then he says in his mind, "Thank goodness. He's so easy to handle." Then Ivan gets up, saying, "But I still don't accept ya here, all right?" Rwanda says, "Same here. Don't drag me down." Midwinter says, "Any questions?" Zoe says, "Should we leave the hideout intact or destroy it?" Midwinter says, "It's fine to leave the building and any bodies. We've hired a separate dedicated cleanup crew." May says, "Is it okay to take the valuables? They're the ones behind those daily upper area robberies. There's a possibility they're storing loot somewhere, right?" Midwinter says, "That's true. I'll allow it. However, everyone must withdraw completely by dawn." Later the next day, Zoe calls his informer and tells him, "Deliver this to Mr. Matthews for me. Tell him it's the meeting details." The informer says, "Why are you doing this?" As Zoe looks back, the informer says, No, I was just a bit curious, that's all. Like if you're dissatisfied with your current boss or..." Zoe says, "Dissatisfied, huh? Damn right I am. I hate that fool. I've endured it until now, but I'm sick and tired. Midwinter, even though he's incompetent, he's so full of himself. A damn nobody commanding us from on high. That fool looks at us like we're beneath him. Just the way he talks makes me nauseous. You satisfied now? Go on and get moving. The informer runs off saying, yes. 3 days later, as planned, they burn down their hideout, causing everyone's attention to divert towards the burning house. Build says, oi, the pigs are going to get suspicious of that. Another member says, ah, Mr. Build, what's all the fuss about? Build says, hurry up and go put that fire out. I'll let the boss know. The member says, yes, sir. Meanwhile, over at the border of the house, Midwinter says, it's about time. Zoe says, yeah. Midwinter says, let's move in. As they enter the hideout, Midwinter says, clear so far. Everyone understands the plan, right? Everyone says in unison, yes. Rwanda sees Zoe and says to himself, Zoe, why is he hiding by himself? Just then, May notices some people and says, no, this, ambush. Matthews comes out and says, mission accomplished. Just then, Zoe comes out as Matthews says, thank you for the tip. Thanks to you, our ambush was successful. As promised, I'll admit you as one of our executives right away. Just then, Midwinter says, Zoe. Zoe says, yes, sir. Midwinter says, thank you very much. As Rwanda slays Zoe, saying, ah, the strike of this knife, it's superb. Matthew's goon says, you've done it now. Another one says, what's going on? You all help him. Zoe says, yes, sir. Get back, Mr. Matthews. May says, idiot, why'd you protect him? I'm disappointed, Zoe. You all. Ivan says, hey, is this all of them? Rwanda says, boring. Small fry, the lot of them. Afterwards, May says, it seems the accomplished mission here was ours. Midwinter says, I had bulletproof gear prepared for tonight. Ivan says, my coat's been shot to pieces. Zoe cries, saying, you saw through the ambush? How? No one knew besides me. Midwinter says, a damn nobody commanding us from on high. Just the way that fool talks makes me nauseous. Was it? Zoe says, shocked. How did you? As Midwinter transforms, he says, that information broker was actually me. As Zoe says, that's insane. Midwinter says, who's the insane one here, you shameful fool? As Matthews runs off, Zoe calls out, Mr. Matthews? Midwinter says, it seems you made a poor choice in employers. My condolences. May. As May says, yeah, Zoe was about to run off, but Midwinter says, you're not going anywhere. A cur like you needs to be shown discipline. As Matthews was running, he calls out, Build! As May was chasing him, she says, damn it, this fool's quick at running away. As Build was busy eating, Matthews comes running. Build! Build says, Mr. Matthews? Matthews says, why are you just sitting there eating? Build says, well, because I was hungry and all. Matthews says, I don't care. There's enemies. As May shoots, Matthews says, my hat. May replies, saying, next shot won't miss, Matthews. Matthews says, look, that's the one. Build. Go. Finish him. Build says, nah, I don't feel like fighting anymore today. Matthews says, I don't care what you feel like. Aren't you supposed to be a dependable gentleman? Defeat them? Do you understand me? Build says, a dependable gentleman. As May says to Matthews, damn it, stop running. Build says, I can't let you through. As he was about to attack May, Rwanda and Ivan strike from the back as May says, thanks, you two. Ivan says, nice timing, eh? As May runs off, Build says, one rat got away. I'll crush them later, after I crush you two. As Rwanda says, so he's the right-hand man. Rwanda says, didn't you say you were good with a gun? Then what was that? You just grazed him? Ivan says, that was on purpose. On purpose. Build gets angry as he says, you tore my jacket, you little brats. You realize how much these clothes cost? As Build tears his clothes, he says, I've really done it now. Rwanda says, that look suits you a lot better. You big oaf. Build says, what's that? Ivan says, idiot. Don't provoke him. Rwanda says, what, are you scared, Ivan? I'm feeling very excited. I can see it now. Him as a large lump of meat. Come, it's finishing time. As everyone was dealing with their targets, Midwinter shoots and says to Zoe, are you trying to escape? You coward. Don't think I'll let you escape so easily. The crime of betraying me is a heavy one. Just this once, I'll forgive you with your death. Atone for your sin with your life. Just then, Matthews runs into some of the maids, as one of them says, are you all right? Matthews says, he's coming. May calls out, damn you. That's enough running. Matthews says, no, I refuse to die here. May sees the maids and says in her mind, the maids, naturally we have to eliminate any witnesses, but I don't want to harm any women. So May says, servants, if you don't want to end up dead, hurry up and get out of here. Matthews grabs one of the maids and says, don't come any closer, or I'll finish her. May stops and says, all right, freeze. Matthews gets happy and says, that worked? May says, so I'm fine as long as I don't get any closer. Matthews says, you plan to shoot from there? Well then, let's see you try. As May shoots, the bullet hits his ear as he cries out, my ear, it hurts, mama. May says, that must sting. I'll end your suffering soon. As the maid gets free and runs, May says, hey, you run on home now. Matthews says, damn woman, I won't let you. As the maid was running, Matthews grabs her dress, and as it tears, he takes the chance, saying, I'll step out. But May says, you're not going anywhere. As May finishes Matthews, the maid thanks her as May says, hurry up and escape. But suddenly, May felt a sharp pang in the side of her stomach and says, an accomplice. The maid says, no, I was threatened. May says to herself, damn, I was careless. How foolish. But a rack like that is totally cheating. She comes back to Matthews and says, I'll take care of the maid later. Let's clean this guy up first. See ya, Matthews. But Matthews says, no. As the maid was about to stab from the back, May backfires. Seeing her, a woman says, what's with those acrobatics? As rumored, you're rather sweet on the ladies. May Glickman. Seeing her, May says, this woman. Who is she? The woman says to May, I shall send you to the depths of hell. As Bild sees the boys, Rwanda runs towards him as Ivan says, oi, hold on. Rwanda leaps into the air and says, I'll be taking your head. As Bild dodges, Rwanda says, he's surprisingly swift. Well, whatever, I'll just cut through him, like this. As Bild pushes Rwanda back, Ivan says, look out. As Rwanda falls back, he says, that's some unusual strength, plus he's quick and tough. Interesting. Monster. Doesn't even begin to describe him. Rwanda says, nice. That guy's worth finishing. Ivan says, oi, moron, let's cooperate. Don't act on your own. This ain't a guy you can take down just by yourself. You listening? Rwanda says, cooperate. Is that a joke? Why am I not allowed to ignore whatever drivel you spout? Let me do what I want. Ivan says, I'm trying to help you and you get all pissy? God, I hate you. As Rwanda strikes, he says, Ivan, getting in the way, this is my game to play. Ivan says, he's flying? As Bild throws Ivan onto his back, Ivan says, that hurts. If I wasn't wearing a bulletproof vest, that could have finished me. As Bild strikes again, Ivan moves, saying, that was close. What's with this strength? Rwanda leaps, saying, you're mine. Again as Bild dodges. Rwanda says, so fast, even though I thought I had him. This guy doesn't know a thing beside brute force. I see how it is. With types like these, it's easy to get rid of them riled up. If we're flies, that makes you a damn gorilla. Bild gets angry as he says, I am a gentleman. Then both Rwanda and Ivan team up and deal with Bild, but he gives Ivan a backhand. Seeing Ivan fall, Rwanda says, he got caught up in the moment and didn't keep his distance, the idiot. Meanwhile, May deals with Matthews and says, now you no longer have a reason to fight me, right? The woman says, Sir, Matthews' orders were the elimination of his enemies. As you are still alive, my orders have not been resolved. May says, don't you know what it means to improvise? As the woman runs to attack May, she says, what a hard-headed woman. As both were attacking, May gets hurt again. The woman says, you're going to shoot a woman dead? May says, I don't want to kill you. Meanwhile, Zoe was about to shoot Midwinter, but he counterattacks, saying, do you really detest me that much, that you would try to play me for a fool? Zoe says, well, what I detest the most is the way you try to use money to control everyone around you. Midwinter says, you don't think I could possibly control all of you with wealth alone. You could never. Zoe says, you think you can perfectly control everyone with just a little cash. You're nothing like Bacchus. Ever since you showed up, the organization has changed for the worse. You hijacked the home he built and ruined the whole thing. Midwinter says, Bacchus, the only thing he ever developed was his waistline. This is why the lot of you are nothing but filthy mutts. Brainless as you might be, everything would be fine if you'd just obey like a goddamn adult. Perhaps I should have refrained from speaking in such a manner. Well, I guess it doesn't matter. You're already a dead man. As Midwinter finishes Zoe, Rwanda, who was fighting Bild, goes over to Ivan and says in his mind, I'd be in a spot of trouble if he went and died here. I finally realized he has value as an ace up my sleeve. Rwanda says to Ivan, I take back what I said. Let's cooperate together. Thoroughly enjoy ourselves. Beat that gorilla. After the struggle, Ivan realizes he's being carried out, says, huh? Someone's carrying me? He used to carry me all the time. Papa. Flashback. Ivan says, Papa's still not home. Ivan's mother says, I'm sure he's out of breath trying to run home. After all, today's a very special day, you know. Just then, Ivan's father comes running. I'm home. Ivan says happily, Papa, it's chicken. Ivan's father says, happy birthday, Ivan. Ivan's mother says, eager as always, Jim. You couldn't even wait to sit down before celebrating, could you? One day, Ivan's father met a man who said, yes, let's start something new together, the two of us. Jim says, Roy, you're always like this. Roy says, don't be like that. It's 'cause we're such close friends that I'm even talking about this. I've been fed up with this life, Jim. The two of us are going to launch our business and escape this awful life of ours. For penniless people like us to escape this pigsty, we'll need to do business with the upper class. But the business failed, as Jim was sitting on the pavement in the rain. Ivan's mother says, what are you doing out here? You haven't been home and Roy's nowhere to be found. Jim says, I was cheated. Everything we've saved up is gone. All we have left is our debt. It's all over. Yvonne's mother says, it's not over yet. Somehow, someway. "So, please let's go home, okay?" As the creditors were banging on the door, Ivan's mother says, "You've been drinking again. Get it together. Escaping from reality isn't going to help our debt any." One day, Jim takes Ivan shopping. Ivan was happy as he says in his mind, "Papa's gone back to how he was before." Just then, Jim says, "Ivan, if you happen to see a high-class carriage coming this way, jump out in front of it." Seeing Ivan is confused, Jim says, "There's no need to be afraid. Just try to get nicked a little, but pretend you've been horribly injured. If it's you, I know you can do it." Ivan says, "No way. Jim gets angry as he says, "Didn't you hear what your father told you?" As a carriage was coming, Jim says, "Here, this carriage looks like it should be just about right." Jim pushes Ivan in front of the carriage, shocking Ivan. As Ivan fell in front of the carriage, Jim begins to act, "Oh, what a thing to happen. I looked away from my son for but a moment." The coachman comes over saying, "That boy just came flying out of nowhere." As Midwinter got off the carriage, the coachman says, "This child ended up in front of the carriage all of a sudden." Jim says, "It's worse that you were driving through the streets so carelessly." Midwinter comes over and checks Ivan, and then he says, "Looks like he has a small bruise on his shoulder, but nothing's broken." Jim says, "You injured my dear son. How do you plan to handle this?" Well, Midwinter says, "True, it's not ideal that your son was brought to harm. What to do? Let us transport him to the hospital. Load him onto the carriage." Jim says, "No, his injuries aren't really that serious, though. I'll take him to the hospital myself. So, just give me the hospital fee," Midwinter says in his mind. "So it was staged." Then he says to Jim, "How much will it be?" Jim was about to tell, but Midwinter says, "No, how much will it be for the child?" Ivan sees his father and says, "Stop it, Papa." Jim says, £30? Midwinter says, £50, and hands over the money. Jim takes the money and runs away, leaving Ivan. Midwinter tells the coachman, "Get the child in the carriage." As they board, Midwinter tells Ivan, "You saw it all, didn't you? You've been sold. I understand you might feel resentment towards your father, but there's quite a large number of damn parents like yours in this city." Ivan says, "If you say another word bashing my papa like that, even if I lose my arms and legs, I will absolutely finish you." Ivan says in his mind as he was recalling, "Papa, he was crying. My papa's not a bad guy. He just got broken down by money. When you run out of money, your love goes with it. I will definitely get Mom and Papa back with money. I'll get my love back." As Rwanda was carrying Ivan out, Ivan says, "What you carrying me for?" Rwanda drops him, saying, "If you've woken up, walk on your own." Ivan says, "Did you save me back there?" Rwanda says in his mind, "For the sake of using you." Then he says to Ivan, "We're comrades, aren't we? It's just as you said, there's no way a single person can take that guy down. Let's make a plan." Ivan says, "So you're finally warming up to cooperating." Rwanda says, "First, we'll need to split up. I'll lead the big guy to where he needs to be. Then I'll come out through this back door." As Rwanda explains the plan, Ivan says, "You sure he's gonna go chasing you?" Rwanda says, "He will absolutely come after me. I made a complete fool of him." As they come back, Rwanda teases Build, saying, "We were getting tired of waiting." Slowpoke. Build says, "Slowpoke, just wait, I'll beat you again." But as planned, Build runs after Ivan, making him say, "Fool, this isn't what we talked about," as he runs to save himself. But Build still manages to catch Ivan. As Ivan escapes, Build says, "I see. So you think you can beat me by sneaking around? Pointless." As Ivan throws some powder on Build, he says, "What kind of cheap trick are you pulling? You'll never be able to destroy this body of mine." Then, as he waits for the boys to attack, Build says, "Why aren't they coming? This powder, this is flour?" Meanwhile, outside, Rwanda takes a shot at the target he planned. A while back, Rwanda says, "Yes, if we scatter wheat flour throughout the room and light a spark, it'll explode." They explained this in class, remember? Memorize this spot here. We can make a spark by shooting from outside. As Ivan says, "My job?" Rwanda says in his mind, "I can't hit that shot on my own. I got no choice but to rely on you." Ivan says, "You finally recognize the shooting prowess of Ivan the Great." As they blow up the place, seeing Build come out, Ivan says, "Is he immortal?" Rwanda says in his mind, "I figured this would happen." Then he says to Build, "I've been envisioning this for a while." Build says, "The point where you are finished." Rwanda says, "The point where you are finished by me. I've been waiting for this moment. After waiting for so long, a real challenge for the first time. But that's why I'm feeling exaltation, relief, alive. I'm relieved. I'm satisfied." After the boys' bickering stops, Rwanda says, "I still have one more thing to take care of. You can head back first. We'll meet up later." As Rwanda climbs the stairs, he says, "Sorry for the wait. I'm coming for you, May." As May deals with the woman, she sits against the wall. On seeing Rwanda, she says, "You two finished everything on your end? This gash is a little much for me, though. Kindly lend me your shoulder." Rwanda says, "How unfortunate. With all the blood you're losing, you already can't move, can you?" May says, "You didn't repent at all, did you?" Rwanda says, "So is that why you went and tattled on me to Midwinter?" May says, "You're way too incredibly selfish." Rwanda says, pointing at Matthews's body, Wasn't this man here killed for your own selfishness? May says, that was business. He was the target. In order to eat and in order to live, killing him couldn't be avoided. Rwanda says, you just don't get it, do you? Targets, normal people, enemies, allies. Where does it all end? Nobles, politicians, the public. Due to their social class, their lives are not valued the same. The flesh of livestock and that of humans are weighed differently. Even though the blood of everyone runs red, slaughtering the enemy and finishing that brat Kevin is one and the same. May says, if you raise your hand against him, it won't. Rwanda says, why? As May says, Kevin is my. Rwanda says, your family, so you're upset. May says, love is love. Sins are for the sake of protecting your comrades, your family, those close to you. You'll understand someday, when you have people you love and want to protect. Rwanda says, people I love? There's no comfort in something like that up to now and from here on out. Rwanda says, you keep babbling about love, about family, and you wonder why you end up losing like this. May gets angry and says, this kid. Hey you, that is about enough of that. If you're lonely, just be honest and say it. Every time you kill someone, it widens the gap in your heart. And in order to fill that hole, you kill again just to feel temporary pleasure. It's precisely because you want to fill up that hole in your heart. You struggle against anyone who tries to understand you. Rwanda says, if you're obedient and allow me to finish you, I won't lay a single hand on Kevin. May says, he has nothing to do with this. Rwanda says, if you love him so much like you're saying, put your life on the line and show me your proof. May says, fine, life or death. I'll make my decision, if doing so will lead to the protection of my family. As Rwanda was about to strike, May says, Kevin, I love you. Rwanda stops, shocked. Ivan also went back to the mansion, looking for some leftover treasure. As he was sneaking around, he sees people taking the injured as Midwinter says, I'm entrusting you to care for the injured. Ivan says, oh, I see. Midwinter mentioned these guys. The cleaning crew, huh? Just then, Midwinter comes, saying, Ivan, it appears you're still here. Didn't I say to keep moving until the sun rose? As Midwinter leaves, Ivan climbs on the back of his carriage, saying, who's heading back quietly? Not me. Midwinter's secrets have definitely got to lead to money or weapons at some point. After what Ivan saw, he says, so they're taking the bodies all the way to the hospital, huh? Just why would they be doing that? So Ivan follows and sees Midwinter standing against the wall as boys and girls were being operated upon. As one boy passed away, the doctor says, it's no use, same as before. Another failure, the experiment is over. As he shouts, Ivan says in his mind, escape, this is dangerous. He ends up placing his hand on a rat and screams, but Ivan still manages to escape. As Ivan was out in the open, he says to himself, what the hell was that? Those two kids, they were about the same age as me. Finishing there like that. This has nothing to do with money. Just then, he hears shots above his head. Damn, they found me. As Ivan was about to get shot, he sees a girl. So he says, who are you? As the men come looking for him, the girl takes hold of his hand and says, this way. As she brings Ivan to the gate, she says, thank goodness, the lock is still broken here. If you head out here, you'll be able to reach the outside. Ivan says, why are you helping me? The girl says, you looked like you were crying. Feeling sad like that, I know that feeling too well. Flashback to 2 weeks earlier. The girl is Makalo and is in the hospital. As they sedate her to sleep, the nurse says, her wounds have healed and she remains unconscious for the time being. The doctor says, when I thought she was regaining consciousness, she was still terribly delirious. There's also the possibility of her harming the other patients. So for now, she should remain in isolation. The nurse says, I will lend my aid when she proves too much to handle. The doctor says, you saying that is a big help? Having to tell her what happened once she's calmed down? That will be rough. The nurse says, they believe it to be a double harm, they said. Either way, telling her also falls under our responsibility. As the doctor goes to check on her, he sees her standing by the window. Oh, looks like you're awake? The doctor says in his mind, looks like she's calmed down. Thank heavens. Then he says, Makalo, how are you feeling? On seeing the doctor, Makalo says, Father Peter. Father Peter says, yes, that is right, Makalo. It's me, Father Peter, the friend of your father's. You and I used to play around back in the days. It's me, Peter. I'm the doctor in charge here, so don't worry about a thing. You're safe. Makalo says, wait, this is? Where's mommy and daddy? Father Peter says, do you remember anything about the accident? Seeing she is confused, he says to himself, as I thought, her memory seems she's blocked out everything about the incident. Then Father Peter says to Makalo, this isn't easy for me to say, but your parents, they're no longer with us. Someone else will be looking after you. You're in the hospital. You were caught up in what happened and got injured. We weren't able to save your mom and dad, but you miraculously survived. You don't have to worry. You're safe now. At first, Makalo is hysterical, but as she calms down, Father Peter says, "Even though we were only able to save you, I'm truly relieved." As Makalo says, "Why did I end up all by myself? If only I had..." Father Peter says, "The whole time you were unconscious, you know how much I was worried?" He says in his mind, "That's right. I've always been looking out for you, Makalo, more than you've ever known. You're not all by yourself here. Please understand that if anything. I'll be by your side. I'll stop by later. Now, rest easy for the time being." Back to present. Ivan says, "I'm not going to thank you for this, one that I'll pay back someday." Makalo says, "Do what you like," much to Ivan's surprise. As Makalo was sitting in her bed, she hears a voice from the window. On seeing, she sees a boy making faces. Makalo smiles as she says, "What a terrible expression." Leo says, "Heh, did that cheer you up, Makalo?" As Andy gives Makalo flowers, she says, "Wow, thank you. Andy's been so kind ever since we first met, hasn't he?" Leo says, "And me." "Right," Makalo says, "And you." "All right." Just then, Father Peter opens the door and says, "Good morning, Makalo. How are you feeling?" Seeing Andy and Leo, he says, "You two, you got out? Return immediately." As they run off, Leo says, "Looks like you caught us." As they were running, Makalo calls, "I'll get to see you again, right? We'll meet again, right?" Andy says, trembling, "Yeah, of course." Father Peter says, "Makalo, I don't want to have to tell you this, but it would be for the best if you didn't get involved with the other children, especially those two, Leo and Andy. They're..." Seeing Makalo's attachment with them, Father Peter says in his mind, "They've been meeting that often? While I was in the dark, to my Makalo." Then he says to Makalo, "You shouldn't be getting along with them. Saying they would see you again, it's an impossible promise. Those two, the fact they've lived this long is nothing short of a miracle. There's no guarantee they'll be alive tomorrow or the next day." Makalo says, "What are you saying? You're expecting them to finish? So that's how it is. Could this be a test from God? Just taking everything that's important to me. Taking. Are they also going to be finished like how Mama and Papa were?" As Makalo gets hyper, she asks, "Who killed them?" Father Peter says, "Calm down, Makalo." Meanwhile, in the lab, the head surgeon says, "All right, shall we begin?" Leo hugs Andy and says, "Andy, it's already over." As Andy says, "It's not all right at all." Andy says, "We gotta get out of this place, whatever we have to do, so that we can stay alive." The woman says, "You know, it's dangerous to go out this late at night. Within the fog, monsters are always lurking." Sweet dreams. Midwinter says, "Normally the brain acts as a limiter for the body. It's a system to prevent the destruction of one's body from the burden of using all your strength. But there are some cases when someone is confronted with mortal peril that those limiters are lifted, and they display unbelievable strength. One problem is the method to remove a human's mental limiter. The other is how to produce humans who obediently follow orders and don't feel fear. Lately, we have been experiencing failure, but those two have survived to this day." The director says, "Research like this is simply a constant march forward. Our progress has been steadily increasing. We'll see the results if we just keep it up." Midwinter says, "Well, then I hope you're willing to continue lending your cooperation a bit longer, for the sake of creating the most powerful soldier." The director says, "Another thing, Mr. Midwinter, sir, you were performing a separate experiment, were you not? How is that proceeding?" Midwinter says, "Well, director, you seem quite well informed. Unfortunately for your sake, it would be wise not to go any further with this unnecessary line of questioning." As Midwinter leaves, he says in his mind, "Mature and exceed my expectations, Rwanda. Show me the results of your training for the Bailey family." Meanwhile, over at the hideout, Rwanda enters Midwinter's office and says to himself as he recalls Midwinter talking about his mother, "I need to figure out what the connection is between those two. Let's see what we can find while he's away for the moment." 1868. The Baileys? Then he finds a photo with Midwinter and Miranda. Rwanda says, seeing the photo, "So they were involved, but I'm not seeing Midwinter anywhere in this photograph. Just what was their relationship?" Then as he gets his hands on a letter, Rwanda says, "So you really were still alive, mother?" Miranda had written, "Give Rwanda back to me. Rwanda is my son." As Ivan was taking a bath, he says to himself, "It turned out that Midwinter was a much more dangerous person than I thought. First things first, I need to look deeper into those experiments. Then I can definitely be of some help. Someday, for sure, when I leave this organization." As Ivan got into bed, Rwanda says, "Coming back so late, huh? You're just so terrible, darling. Abandoning me all evening." Ivan says, "So you're awake." Rwanda says, "Both you and Midwinter went missing at the same time." "No, wait, don't tell me you were having fun." As they both begin to fight, Rwanda says, "Can we go have a talk outside?" As they meet at the designated time, Ivan says, "May is being held at that hospital funded by the organization. Who knows how many kids are there?" Rwanda says, "I already knew that." Ivan says, "Those involved with the organization are kept isolated from the rest of the patients." Rwanda says, Oi, is this all you know? I didn't come here to hear about things that don't matter. Ivan says, I'll say the rest after you give me your side of the story and don't give crap about anything besides yourself. Why are you playing around with Midwinter? Rwanda says, he's involved with my mother. Midwinter somehow snatched and hid me away from my mother on purpose. I found in his quarters. That's what I'm trying to figure out. Why did my mother not want him to have me? Ivan says, I'm shocked. This ain't the sort of thing you can joke around about. Rwanda says, now, are you going to continue? Ivan says, there's human experiments taking place back at the hospital. They're using random civilians. Saw it with my own eyes. Rwanda says, I wonder why. Well, it was good we both got some more information out of all this. Going forward, let's make sure to let each other know what we find out. Ivan says, you're kidding me. Don't pretend to be my friend. Rwanda says, between you and me, there is absolutely no friendship. We're only using each other. Mutual give and take. It would be best for you to consider me a convenient tool and use me. I'll do the same to you. And that is our relationship. Ivan says, you don't need to explain that to me. I understand clearly. As Rwanda is alone, he says to himself, in the end, there wasn't anything about Midwinter and Mother exchanging letters beside that one note. It's suspicious that one letter be by itself. If it was an important message, he would have burned it after reading it. If he kept it around, that means that there's a reason for it. It could also be that it's set up as some kind of trap. But even so, supposing that letter really was written by Mother. Even if she can't reach out to me directly, Mother is surely protecting me. The woman was Miranda, as she recalled her childhood and the time she spent with her brother. She recalls the day, Mr. Bailey said, this is the Bailey family. Miranda recalled saying, on that day, I swore an oath. This family is my sole and absolute ally. I promise the family my absolute loyalty for as long as I live. Mr. Bailey says, you must never break your oath. To betray the family means death. Miranda says, yes, Father. The two families of the underground, the Spencers and the Baileys. We carry out any kind of job under cover of night. Assassination, obfuscation, camouflage. Other than a few individuals, our true characters remain unknown. Those who are unfortunate are abruptly erased from the world. In the scope of the two major families, I alone possessed the highest level of skill. Since the day I swore that oath at the age of 9, I continued to eliminate countless individuals in perfect beauty. There was nothing standing in my way, no obstacles or problems, until the day the man arrived. As the party was going about, the man says, first impressions are everything, you know? Suddenly he says, someone here has my attention. As he followed Miranda, he saw her kill 2 men. As she was attacking the man, Miranda notices, however, he's still weaker than me. The man smiles as he says, wonderful. Not only are you beautiful, you are strong as well. It seems I've done something regrettable. I ended up seeing you murder those 2 men. At first, I thought it was love at first sight, and I was right. I have to say, you're my ideal woman. Come with me. There's so many things I want to show you. As Miranda opposes, he pulls her hand saying, we're here, my pride, the flower garden. Just as I thought, it suits you, Miranda says, recalling the time. He was right to think that. For a moment, my bloodlust was tamed. I couldn't help but admire the beauty of that garden. The man says, there is no woman greater than you. It matters not if you are the devil himself. I'd like to see you again. I take it you're an assassin or something. No, it doesn't matter what you are. If it would benefit you, I'd gladly help you cover everything up. Oh, I'm getting ahead of myself. My name is Clive. I'm a member of the family here, Miranda says in her mind, recalling the time. At the time, I was still unaware. Later on, I would come to think that it would have been better to have killed him, because this man was the disaster that had fallen upon me. Clive Herbert, later Sir Midwinter, and Rwanda's father. Flashback. Miranda's mother says, your father is tremendously upset, Miranda. I have to say I'm also quite disappointed. Getting pregnant with the child of a random bloke from goodness knows where. You must choose. Shall I take the child's life here and now, or will you do it yourself? Miranda says, do you not understand my feelings, dear mother? Despite giving birth to me yourself? Miranda's mother says, are you saying you want to birth this child? As she slaps Miranda, you are a woman of the Bailey family. If this was an individual from a recognizable household, it might be condoned. But right now, that child in your abdomen isn't needed in this world. I'll give you until morning to decide. Finally, Miranda says to herself, a child is nothing more than a burden. I guess I don't really need it. I'll just give birth to it and toss it away. He never came. It's fine. I don't need that man. I won't see him again anyway. I searched for a small home, a place where I could hide myself without anyone I knew around. When Rwanda was born, the maid said, such a cutie. Would you like to hold him? Miranda said, no thanks. The maid was stubborn as she said, you haven't even held him once yet. Come now. As she hands Rwanda over to Miranda, she says, from now on, you'll bless this child with all the love and joy in the world so that he may grow healthy and strong. Miranda says, impossible. This child will never be happy. I could never be anything like a mother. Then, as Miranda came back, she says, I have rid myself of the child. Miranda's mother says, "Oh, really? Welcome back, Miranda." As Miranda was out in the market, Midwinter says from behind, "Congratulations on the newborn." Miranda says, "What are you scheming?" Midwinter says, "How cruel. It's our long-awaited reunion." As Midwinter says Miranda's servant told him about the location, he says, "Today, I came to you with a request. Let me take care of the child as well. You can continue to raise the child until he's 12 years old. The only condition is that he is raised as though he had never been born, kept hidden away." As Miranda strikes at Midwinter, he says, "That Miss Connolly, I got her to quit, you know. Right now, everyone at your hideout is an individual I positioned there. If anything happens to me, my girl there could end up causing harm to the child." Miranda says, shocked to herself, "He's kidding. This is hell." Then she says, "That child is only a burden anyway." Midwinter says, "I see. Shall I have him done away with then? You knew he would be a burden from the get-go, and yet you still chose to birth and raise that child. Thank you for making that splendid choice." Miranda says in her mind, "Since the day he was aware of his surroundings, he took life without a thought, as had I, when I was his age." A conversation between Miranda and Rwanda. Miranda says, "Do you like finishing things? Why do you feel driven to finish life?" Rwanda says, "It's my friend." Miranda says, "That body is your friend? I never once had a single friend to my name. It never even occurred to me to do something like make friends. I always had my family, the four of us. But all this boy has for a family is myself, the mother he sees only sparingly, and no one else." Flashback to when Rwanda was 12 years old. Rwanda says, "Mother, I want to help assist you with your work." Miranda says, "You always help me, though." Rwanda says, "Not like that. I want to be the one to finish." Miranda says, "You can't do that. I can't let you show yourself to the outside world." Back to present. As Miranda was coming back, she looks at the bottle in her hand and says, "A legend, huh? I wonder if one of the servants told him about that." As she enters, she says, "I have returned." As she looks around, she says, "The atmosphere's different. Everything's tense. Something's wrong." Miranda sees her parents and brother have been finished off and the house has caught fire. So she bids farewell and runs out. As she was running out, someone shoots her, making her unconscious. As Miranda awakens, Midwinter says, "Sorry for the sudden shot to the leg. I've made sure you receive the necessary medical care, though. I'm really not that fond of attacking women like this, but I didn't have much choice if I wanted to take you down. The era of the Baileys is at an end. But even then, your whole family has died, and you haven't shown a single tear. That's just like you." Miranda says, "Everyone dies sooner or later." Just then, a man arrives, saying, "We've arrived." As he takes hold of Miranda, the man says, "Your part in the story ends here." As the man was taking Miranda away, Midwinter says, "Don't poke your nose in any further. If you get involved, your son might encounter a grisly fate." As Rwanda was walking in the crowd, he felt like someone was behind him. As he looks back, he sees it's a mother who is taking hold of her child. A little away from him, Miranda gets stopped by another woman who says, "So, you're disagreeing with Master Midwinter's warning, are you?" On seeing her, Miranda says in her mind, "The woman that was keeping tabs on Rwanda." Then she says, "Don't interfere. I don't have the time to mess around with her." As Miranda takes the chance to attack the woman, she falls, saying in her mind, "Not again. My arms and legs, they're numb." The woman says, "Oh my, is your body failing you? That settles it then. You really shouldn't be picking fights you can't win in the first place. Now behave and just go back where you came from." As the woman leaves, Miranda says, "Damn, it's no use. I don't have any strength. Soon. I need to end this all soon, before my body gives out for good. Rwanda is, my child, mine," the woman says. The affliction seems to be affecting her physical health. It's possible it will fully consume her soon. Midwinter says, "Good work. Seems the time has come." Meanwhile, Miranda, who was back in her room, says, "Looks like they're leaving me alone. I was hesitant to retreat, but thanks to that woman, I've cooled my head a bit. Time for a change of plans." As Miranda was going through the forest, she falls to the ground. A doctor was passing by who sees her, saying, "Are you all right?" As Miranda awakens, the doctor says, "It appears to be hemiplegia, or selective paralysis, resulting from an obstruction in your spinal cord's peripheral nerves. There shouldn't be any complications in your day-to-day life for now, but you might see some continuing effects. You may experience numbness and loss of strength in the left half of your body." Miranda says, "This is a lot to take in. At the end of the day, I'm only human. I'm very thankful you were the one who happened to find me, kind doctor. It was very sudden, but you saved my life there." As Miranda leaves the doctor's place, she says to herself, "Looks like I don't have much time left. The moment I have a child to protect, I lose my strength. I never took the chance to treat him well either, at this point." Well, when Rwanda was born, I felt something. Some feeling I had never experienced. When I came back and said I got rid of that child. Because of that, I couldn't bear to part with the child. It'd be nice to find somewhere I could live with Rwanda, where no one could hurt him. A quiet world with just the two of us. Until now, I'd been keeping my distance. But I'll get back my time with my child. I'm not dead yet. I'll hunt down that fool and his minions until they're wiped from the face of the earth. Meanwhile, as Ivan and Rwanda were having their rendezvous, Rwanda says, I think he might have noticed me poking around in his desk, and we haven't found any more clues as of late. Ivan says in his mind, Rwanda looks like he's close to giving up. Seems our information rendezvous are at an end. Then Ivan says to Rwanda, ain't this enough already? Even if you can't see your mom, not like it'd be much of a big deal. Rwanda says, what did you say? Ivan says, earlier, I asked you what you'd do if you did meet her, and you said it then. She would acknowledge me. After I've gone out on my own and finished so many people, my mother will surely acknowledge me. Rwanda says, you've grown. How brilliant. My mother used to praise me when I did away with someone, so that's why she'll surely praise me more after everything I've done. Ivan says, in that case, as Rwanda looks confused, suppose you ever did meet her. It ain't no guarantee she'd acknowledge you, you know, turning our boss into our enemy just for some damn praise. As Rwanda pushes Ivan into the water, he says, sorry. As Rwanda takes hold of Ivan's hand, he slashes Ivan's wrist and says, sinking you here and now would bring me great joy. It might be just some praise to you, but to me it's the most important thing in the world. As Ivan gets out of the water, he says, my folks? Since I separated from my folks once I went back to take a look at the house I used to live in. The house was demolished. I had no idea where my folks were, or if they were even alive. But I'm used to that now. That's why earlier I said what I said. Even if you never meet your mother, the loneliness grows numb eventually. Rwanda recalls when his mother said, my adorable devil, let's have some fun. Rwanda says, if I was going to grow numb, I'd have left this organization a long time ago. Ivan says, rubbing his shoulder. It's important we stop doing this. Rwanda says, are you frustrated, having never reunited with your own folks? I'm different. I think I can meet her again, if I just keep looking. 1 month later, Miranda was at a party and was looking for the right time to strike. As she began, she says, not enough. More. Let's play more. As Rwanda was following a child, suddenly a woman falls from above, right in front of him. He looks up and says, from above. Suddenly, a woman takes hold of his hand, and as she points her gun at him, she says, that's 1 death. Rwanda says, who are you? And tries to get free. The woman says, that's 2 deaths. As Rwanda fails to get free, she says, your training has been a complete failure. I thought I'd be able to see more of how you perform, but that is out of the question. I can't believe you've survived in the underworld like this. As Rwanda fails again, she says, that's 3 deaths. That's no good. Weak doesn't even begin to describe it. Rwanda says, that voice, it sounds familiar. As Miranda removes her veil, Rwanda says, no way, mother. Miranda says, there's no time to waste, so I'll explain later. Stay quiet and come with me. Don't stop moving. Keep walking. As they were walking, suddenly a carriage hits Miranda, and a boy comes over, saying, you had the gall to throw my sister to her doom. Miranda plunges the dagger onto him. As Rwanda says, mother. Miranda says to herself, seems I'm less injured than I thought. If I hadn't made it into that nook, it would have been a different story though. Their assassination attempt was a failure, but leaving Rwanda in their hands was my mistake. Rwanda says, mother, this isn't just a dream. I always believed you were still alive. There's so many things I want to tell you about. Miranda says, now is not the time for chit-chat. There is still something I need to take care of. She says to herself, I know that hole Midwinter is hiding in. Next time, I will make sure to exterminate him. Then Miranda tells Rwanda, everything will be over soon, so I need you to stay here. We're going to be heading overseas. We can talk once we've boarded the ship. Rwanda says as Miranda was packing, what's the thing you need to take care of? Where are you going? Miranda says, you don't need to know that right now. Rwanda says, if you won't tell me, I'm coming with you. Miranda says, so if I tell you you'll stay here? Fine. I'm going to settle things with Clive, or maybe you know him better as Midwinter. He uses that alias, Midwinter. Rwanda gets shocked as he says to himself, she's gonna finish him. Then he says to Miranda, if that's the case, I'm definitely coming. I might not compare to you in strength, but I've gotten really experienced in finishing. I'm stronger now. As Miranda was leaving, Rwanda says, please, look at me. In fear, he says in his mind, I don't want her to go. Not again. As Rwanda tugs on Miranda's skirt, she slaps him saying, you're being a nuisance. I won't be able to succeed with you tagging along. Rwanda says, it doesn't matter who it is, you'd always succeed, right? Miranda says, I'm not strong enough to protect you. I can't afford to let anything happen to you. Rwanda says, but you are the legendary assassin. Miranda says, what legend? You believed everything you heard so easily, and it still controls you. You foolish son. This is why I despise children. You should have never been born. Seeing his sad face, Miranda says to herself, crap, now that I have him in front of me, I have no clue how to treat him. Then she says to Rwanda, what's with that face? Rwanda says, this isn't what I thought. As Rwanda tries to speak, Miranda stops him. Rwanda gets angry and says, you're not my mother. You're an imposter. As Rwanda was fighting with his mother, the boy attacks as Rwanda says, let me go. and Miranda says, "Don't you dare touch that child." Miranda sees it's the woman she thought she had finished off. The woman says, "We've been instructed to take you to Sir Midwinter." As Rwanda comes to his senses, he says, "My head hurts. I feel dizzy." Midwinter says, "So just where did you two think you were running off to? You had the gall to disregard my ever-so-kind warning. I'll be needing you to pay recompense for that, with your life." Miranda says, "How far do you plan to drag Rwanda into this before you're satisfied?" Midwinter says, "I brought Rwanda here for a matter of re-education. Your discipline has been clearly lacking. However, I'm a generous man. This time, I'll limit his punishment to a simple instruction of pain." As Midwinter was about to harm Rwanda, Miranda strikes, finishing the woman and then hitting Midwinter. As Midwinter is struck, he says, "What is this? I thought you were." As Midwinter falls, Miranda says, "Sweet dreams." As Miranda slays Midwinter and his minions, she says, "It's all over, Rwanda." But Midwinter gets up and takes hold of Rwanda and says, "That's right, it's over." Miranda says to herself, "I thought he was finished." Then she says, aiming at his head, "Obstinate fool." Miranda runs over to Midwinter's body, an irritating man to the very last. Now where was he keeping the key for that chair? Just then, she notices and says, "There are 2 guns?" Then she looks towards Rwanda and says, "Don't tell me. Could it be he fired his gun at the same time I did?" Miranda runs over to Rwanda and tries to stop his bleeding with her hand as she says, "This can't be." "No," Rwanda says, crying. "It hurts." Miranda carries Rwanda and rushes with him to the doctor. As the doctor sees Miranda, he says, "You're from the other day." After examining, the doctor says, "He's lost too much blood. You must take him to a larger hospital. Why did you bring him to a clinic as small as mine?" Miranda raises her gun and says, "This isn't the time for discussion. Save the child. Do whatever you have to do to save him. Right now." The doctor says, "It appears the bullet passed right through him. If we operate on the wounded tissue, that would help. But if we did that, he would likely expire from blood loss." Miranda says, "If that's the issue, give him my blood." The doctor says, "Injecting him with another person's blood would also likely kill him. More likely than not." Miranda says, "I'm not just another person. This boy is my own child. Perform the operation. If there's any chance of success, do it." After treating Rwanda, the doctor says, "We've finished treatment of his wounds. It doesn't look like his body is rejecting the blood transfusion either. The transfusion is vital to keeping this boy alive, but," Miranda says, "But," the doctor says, "if we keep the blood transfusion going, you'll end up dying yourself." Miranda says, "Oh, so that's all. That's a trivial matter. If you don't want me to kill you, you'll listen to what I'm going to say." As Miranda looks at Rwanda, she says, "All right, I'd like us to be left alone for a bit. Would you mind stepping outside?" As Miranda lays beside Rwanda, she caresses him, saying to herself, "Being here like this brings back memories. The moment I first held you in my arms, a shock ran through my body. A feeling I had never experienced before in my life welled up from within me. I grew scared of those emotions. The possibility of losing sight of myself as an assassin terrified me, and so I kept my distance. If I repressed my emotions, I could continue on with my work as I always had. But once I lost you, I realized the pain of losing my child." Miranda says, holding Rwanda in her arms, "I realized much too late, your life is more precious than my own. I'm so sorry for everything, for not being able to apologize for not being there with you." As Rwanda awakens, Miranda says, kissing him on his forehead, "I really wanted to say that to you. I truly love you, ever since the day you were born." As she dozes off, Miranda says, "Live, Rwanda. My only wish is that you continue to live." As Miranda hugs Rwanda, he says in his mind, "Warm. Is this a dream?" Or rather, as Rwanda gains full conscious, he sees Miranda laying beside him and says, "Mother? Mother?" The doctor says, "I'm so sorry. I'm terribly sorry. She passed away from this world. In order to save your life, we needed a massive quantity of blood. Your mother chose to give you a transfusion knowing it would take her own life." Rwanda gets up and says, "You're a doctor. Help her. You're here to help, aren't you?" As the doctor apologizes, Rwanda says, "You think an apology fixes this? Or is this some sort of a cruel joke?" The doctor says, "Doctors are not gods. Medical treatment can only do so much. I've done absolutely everything I can. Besides, as a doctor, I have to respect her wishes." Rwanda takes hold of the doctor and says, "You'll pay for this. You'll pay for my mother's life with yours." The doctor pleads, "Even if I die, it won't bring your mother back. Don't do anything pointless." Rwanda says to himself, "I just wanted you to acknowledge me. I just wanted you to hold me." Then he says, "I only made it this far for my mother in the first place. Now what? What am I supposed to live for now?" Meanwhile, over with Ivan as he was waiting at their rendezvous place, he says, "He ain't coming." Is he playing hooky again? After he had the nerve to call me all the way out here. Just then, Rwanda comes, saying, "Yo." Ivan says, "Not yo. You know how many days I've been waiting? Where were you? You didn't come to the base." Rwanda says, "Some stuff happened. I'm not going back. Never again." Ivan says, "Never again?" As Rwanda says, "My mother died." Ivan says, "What? She was alive? You saying you were with your mother this whole time? And I had no clue since when that was happening." You good? Rwanda says. You know, earlier, I understand why I was so bothered by May. I was jealous of that warmth. I get weird thinking about my mother. My chest gets all warm and tightens up. It's weird. Even though I thought I had shed myself of all emotion. Ivan says, What? Idiot, you got it all wrong. As Rwanda says, confused. Wrong? Ivan says, You are full of emotions. It's not that you don't feel emotions, it's that you just don't know a thing about dealing with them. I've been noticing it. You're just super awkward is all. As Rwanda walks away, he says, Good talk. I just came to say goodbye. Ivan calls out, Oi, good talk? That was too quick. If you're ditching the organization, how are you going to make a living? What's your angle? Rwanda smiles and says, as Ivan was holding him from his shoulder, Mind letting me go? Ivan says, Stop it with that eerie face of yours. If you want to cry, then. Rwanda says, If times are tough or if you're sad, it's all right to cry, right? Someone told me something like that once. I'm not particularly sad, though my mother is dead. I remembered something very important. So, I'm happy, Ivan. So, I'll be leaving now. Ivan calls out, Oi, don't you go off dying in some hole where I'll never see you again. I want to be able to get a good look at your foolish face when you bite it. As Rwanda waves a bye to Ivan, he recalls Makalo's words of creating a bond with blood. He says to himself, I wonder if Mother knew about that. Probably you knew, right? You wanted to become one with me, didn't you? Mother has become inseparable from me. My blood, my flesh, she's alive within me. I feel so happy. I love you, Mother. We'll always be together. An unknown figure came and slashed Miranda's body, saying, This is a public service. This is judgment. Eliminating these dirty bags like exterminating pests, these filthy beings. The next morning, Detective Eric Henry says, The victim is Vivian Ross, escort. We found an acquaintance among the onlookers. At present, a coachman by the name of John is said to be the first to find her. We're investigating other eyewitness testimonials from throughout the day. A journalist says, You fools, useless bunch. Do you believe this is connected to the killer from last week's incident? Eric gets angry and says, You fools, this ain't a peep show. Inspector Benjamin Holt says, Keep your head cool, little Airy. Eric says, Little Airy? Inspector, another new nickname? That really blows. Benjamin turns around saying, How rude. I was so sure you would like it. Then how about Eries, Ariandos, or Iridiot? Eric says, The only accurate part is eerie, and the last one is just mean. Benjamin says, It was a joke. Then he says, examining the body, she suffered 2 deep lacerations to the throat. Her body was slashed, her clothes were torn and badly mutated. The culprit placed the body in a particular fashion. Part of the shoulder was hurt. She also suffered flesh wounds. As the other officers were vomiting at the site, Benjamin says, You don't seem disturbed. Eric says, I used to be in the military and you saw this? Benjamin says, It's just as that journalist stated, this has the same signature as the victim last week, and they might even relate to the Whitechapel murder case for a while. We need to find the culprit soon no matter what. Nevertheless, seeing Eric tensed, Benjamin says, Detective Harris, you must stop staying up all night. It's going to impact the investigation. Eric says first in his mind, He got me. Then he says to Benjamin, I apologize. Benjamin says, If this continues, you'll wind up just like your uncle, no? Flashback. Eric's uncle says, I desire to make this a more peaceful country. Eric says, Cool. As he recalls and says in his mind, I always admired my uncle. That was when I decided to become a detective. Eric recalled the day of his uncle's funeral. The people who attended were saying, I can't believe he was killed in the line of duty. Another one said, I heard it was a gruesome way to go. Did they catch the perpetrator? The first one says, They're in prison, but they're set to be released in just a few years. As Eric stood there, he said in his mind, A good man, my uncle, is dead. And the killer gets to go on with their life after a stint in prison. And I can't let this stand. I'll create a world clean of criminals. Present day. Eric says, If I don't try my hardest now, then when exactly will I? We can't allow killers to roam about the world. Meanwhile, over with Rwanda, as he killed a fox, he says, After Mother died, a strange change came over me. Suddenly, Rwanda heard some random men speaking. Case says, Last week's prey was such a fine lass, wasn't she now? Maida says, That girl? Surely you jest. Casey says, She yelled so much you hit her till she could not speak a word. Hearing them, Rwanda slays each one of them. As he looks at his hands, Rwanda says, No matter what I do, the excitement from before just isn't there. I don't feel a single thing anymore. As Rwanda sat on a table, he recalls in his mind, It's been 5 years since I came to West Scotland. Just then, Sir Henry calls out, Hello. Rwanda replies, Sir Henry. Sir Henry says, How about a break? Shall I have some tea brought out? Rwanda says, Oh, goodness, you're much too kind to me. Sir Henry says, You're quite interested in roses, aren't you? Rwanda says, Yes, they were a favorite of my late mother. Suddenly, Sir Henry's cat comes along, but as Rwanda tries to pat it, the cat growls, making Rwanda say in his mind, That's right. Animals can sense a person's true nature, the base part of someone. Mrs. Henry says to Rwanda, "You're always a helpful one, even volunteering for the community service. We'd be quite glad to compensate you for everything you've done." Rwanda says, "It's quite all right, but I appreciate the consideration." Then Rwanda says to himself, "There's nothing I want. There's nothing I'm living for either. I can't bring myself to attack anyone while feeling so empty, so I've just been working, but I can't tell anyone that." As Rwanda enters his room, he looks at the table. Newspapers. I bought them, but I never actually read through them. But he gets shocked on reading a news that makes him leave the place. As Rwanda was leaving, he says, "Thank you for everything." Mrs. Henry says, "So you're really leaving then?" As Rwanda says, "Yes." As Rwanda leaves, Sir Henry says, "Always so hardworking and diligent, that one." Mrs. Henry says, "Yes, quite the gardener. We'll never find someone like him again." As Rwanda was driving off in a carriage, he says in his mind, "People wear many different faces. Everyone has a part of themselves they keep hidden from others. To avoid being exposed, they put on a front and keep up appearances." As Rwanda arrives in London City, Whitechapel, a girl comes and tugs at Rwanda's coat saying, "Would you like to come and play with me?" Rwanda says, "Sure," and books a room. As Rwanda was with the girl, Kathy, he says, "Oh, Kathy, are you sure you're 20? You don't look like it. You're so cute." Kathy says, "That's right, and yet I still look like a complete child." "But you're just some weird pedophile," Rwanda says. "Not at all. I just have a wide range of tastes. I knew you were an adult when I saw you. But anyway, you really are tiny like a mouse or an ant." Kathy says, "You're making fun of me." Rwanda says, 20 years old. That means I'm the younger one. After all, I'm 18. Kathy says, "I'm jealous. You look like an adult." Rwanda says, "Really?" Then Kathy says, "The person I loved rejected me. Said they weren't interested in someone with the body of a child. He's completely immature, not to mention that plain, unattractive face of his. On top of that, he looked down upon me after learning what I do for a living." Rwanda says, "You don't have any desire to change jobs?" Kathy recalls she swept streets, sold ribbons. She tells Rwanda, "My mom did this profession. She ended up with a significant debt, so I spent most of my time working from a young age." Flashback. Kathy's mother, Annetta, comes saying, "You're working hard, aren't you, Kathy?" Kathy says, "You're always giving it your all, Mama, so I won't lose." Annetta says, "You're a role model for children throughout the world. You're Mama's pride and joy." Just then, Lucas comes. "Hello, Kathy." Kathy says, "Mr. Lucas." Lucas says, "Annetta, a word. You don't have any intention of finding a man, do you? I'm worried about you." Annetta says, "A man was the one who saddled me with this debt. I'll make it on my own." Lucas says, "There has to be someone you like, at least." Annetta says, "I'm getting some help. I'll be able to pay back everything in full soon. And then I'll spend my days happily living with the greatest daughter to grace this earth. Doesn't that sound nice?" Kathy recalls, saying, "My mother, who I loved the most in the whole world, contracted yellow fever and was gone before I knew it." Kathy says at the funeral of Annetta, "What am I supposed to do now?" Lucas says, "You'll be okay. You have us on your side." Then Lucas says, as the men come calling for Annetta, "Soon enough, they'll see my telegram and come running." Kathy says in her mind, "My mom was that important to so many people." After some time to Annetta's death, Lucas says, "You want to be an escort?" Kathy says, "I want to do the same thing as my mom did." Lucas says, "Just quit it. You can't. It's preposterous." Kathy says, "It's not preposterous. I made up my mind a while ago. I'm old enough to live on my own. When my mom was alive, she always said what a great help you were to her. And this time, I want to return the favor." Back to present. Kathy says, "And so, this is the path I choose for myself. I have no regrets. Sometimes I'll remember my mother and get a bit sad, though." As Rwanda takes hold of Kathy's hand, he says, "Frankly speaking, given how hardworking you are, I think you shouldn't have to sell your body like this. But if you weren't working this job, I never would have met you. So I can't complain." Kathy says, "Prostitutes are not dirty or depraved. There's a ton of women out there living strong." Rwanda says, "I see then. They surely can't be forgiven then. The crimes of this devilish ripper." Kathy says, "It's disgusting, but I can't let that stop me." As Rwanda says, "Really?" Kathy says, "You think I'm a fool?" "Don't you?" Rwanda says, "Amazing. I'm not nearly as strong as you are. The loss of my mother found me dragging on for quite some time. Now too." Just then, Kathy pats Rwanda, saying, "You're still a child at heart." The next morning, as they were ready to leave, Rwanda says, "Kathy, can we meet during the day next time?" After a few days, Rwanda meets Kathy. As they were ready to leave, Kathy says, "I'd be happy to have you come to my place tonight, but no, I have some stuff to do. See you." As Kathy began to walk, she felt like someone was following her. She says in her mind, Footsteps from behind. He's still following me. Could it really be the devilish Ripper? If I can make it through there, if I can make it to Rwanda. As the figure was about to attack Kathy, she says, "Stop!" Just then, Rwanda attacks and comes between Kathy and the figure, saying, "Found you. I was looking forward to meeting you, devilish Ripper." Rwanda steps forward and duels with devilish Ripper. But devilish Ripper ends up hurting Rwanda and Kathy. As devilish Ripper was going to strike at Kathy, Rwanda comes in between them. As devilish Ripper leaves, Rwanda asks Kathy, "Are you hurt?" As Rwanda hugs Kathy, she says, "No thank you." Kathy says, "Rwanda?" Rwanda says, "Don't die on me, Kathy," before fainting. As Kathy did Rwanda's wound dressing, she says, "Okay, first aid's done." As Kathy was doing Rwanda's dressing, he says in his mind, "I can't bear to lose this warmth. Just like my mother, this warmth." As Kathy says, "Okay." After doing his wounds first aid, Rwanda kisses Kathy. Meanwhile, Ivan was buying a book. The librarian says, "That's £5. Ivan says, "Bloody daylight robbery. Knowledge is valuable, you know." After buying the book, Ivan was on his way when he stops to buy a rose. Then, as he enters a room, he says, "Yo." It was Mikhailo, who now has grown up and is a reporter, sees Ivan and says, "Ah, let me make some space." As she clears the table, Ivan says, "You fine, don't panic. Being a newspaper reporter must be hard work." Mikhailo says, "Well, how are things treating you? Construction work must be tough." Ivan says, "Oh, you know." Then he says, "You writing an article about the devilish Ripper?" Mikhailo says, "I'm still an apprentice for now, so I'm not allowed to write articles yet. I want to be able to help those who are vulnerable. But the higher-ups are treating these murder cases like a simple gossip, like it's all well and good as long as it sells. How can that stand?" Ivan says, "You fine. I'm happy to listen, even if you just complain." Mikhailo says, "Do you think it'll keep happening? Just why is something like this happening, you think? All those people who died, they all had family and friends out there. Taking someone's life, it's unforgivable." Over with Rwanda and Kathy, Kathy says, "Don't kill anyone." Rwanda says, "You want to escape but don't want to hurt anyone?" Kathy says, "Please." Flashback. Ivan meets with May and tells about Mikhailo. May says, "Hold up a sec. You want to break her out of the hospital, take care of the fallout, and afterwards, secure her personal well-being. All for free? You're a cheapskate, you. Did you fall for her?" Ivan says, "I'm just paying back a favor." May says, "Yeah, I'll lend you a hand. After you forced me to come here and everything, it wouldn't be right for me to ignore the troubles of such young love." Ivan brings Mikhailo over to a home, and as he leaves, he says to Mikhailo, "You'll be all right with those old folks, they're trustworthy. Now, I've returned my favor. Can't be helped, I guess. I don't mind helping you out in the future if you need." Present day. As Ivan was sitting across Mikhailo, he says in his mind, "If Mikhailo found out that I was a hitman, we wouldn't be able to continue on." As Ivan gives Mikhailo a rose, he says, "Here." Seeing the rose, Mikhailo says, "I'm not fully hired yet, though." Ivan says, "Being at the company is a big deal in itself, ain't it?" As Mikhailo grips Ivan's hands, she says, "Thank you. With you at my back, I'll give it my best shot." Ivan gets shocked as Mikhailo says, "After I become a fully fledged reporter and get a front page article, give me a whole bouquet of flowers, okay?" Ivan waves and says in his mind, "Guess I won't have a choice then." As Ivan came back to his room, he sees the lock and says, "Someone must have broken in. The wedge I stuck in the door has fallen." But the landlord hadn't seen anything, which means from the ceiling. As he looks up, the ceiling door's open. So Ivan says, "Bingo! All right, who's there?" Ivan takes his gun out, and as he enters, Rwanda throws a stick and says, "Been a while, Ivan." As Ivan holds the gun pointed towards Rwanda, he says, "Hold up, Rwanda. What are you doing here?" Rwanda says, "Lend me some weapons. I'm looking for goods a real pro would use, not the lame stuff you see around." Ivan says in his mind, "He came all the way here for some weapons?" Rwanda says, "I could help with your work. You didn't have to pay me a thing. Looks like the old base is gone, huh?" Ivan says to himself, "It's gotta be a front, in which case." Then he says to Rwanda, "Will you hear me out for a moment?" Seeing Rwanda confused, Ivan says, "For the weapons. If you hear me out, I'll sell them to you." Rwanda says in his mind, "That was easier than I expected." Then he says to Ivan, okay." As Ivan brings Rwanda to his weapons hideout, Ivan says, "I've done quite a bit for you. What is it you came here to do?" "Educate me." Rwanda smiles, saying, "For the thrill, and to better know myself. See, the devilish Ripper. I want to take his life with my own hands." Rwanda says in his mind, "The first time I've met someone just like myself. By understanding him, I might be able to understand why I no longer feel anything when I kill." Ivan says, "So this time you want to murder a murderer?" Rwanda says, "Sounds like an interesting game, doesn't it?" Ivan says, "If that's what this is about, why don't we work together?" Rwanda says to himself, "I see. He's hiding something. There's another side to this." Meanwhile, Ivan recalls reading a public notice and says in his mind, "For the removal of the devilish Ripper, there's a cash reward, 500 pounds. The perfect chance to get rich quick. Let me make some good use of you. As Rwanda says, all right, Ivan says, counting on you, and both shake hands on becoming partners once again. Recalling seeing Devilish Ripper, Rwanda says in his mind, the mask he wears, it sends shivers down my spine, but it's pretty much the same as mine, the smiling face I use. Rwanda says to Ivan, however, mutating the victim's body, wearing a mask like that, I believe that man truly embodies the idea of wrath itself. Rather than his skills with a knife, I'd say I'm impressed by the power and speed behind his kicks. I think he must be a physician or military doctor. Of course, all I have to go on so far are my observations. Ivan says, your words carry some heavy implications. Rwanda says, hey Ivan, do you know where hell is located? It's inside one's mind. You can't tell who this guy is just from looking at him. Ivan says, in that case, following that line of thinking, I wonder if you got a hell in your mind too then. Rwanda says in his mind as he thinks, come to think of it, after my mother died, her voice completely vanished from my mind. Why? What on earth was that about? Just then, Ivan says, oi, get a grip, Rwanda. As Rwanda says, I'm fine. Ivan says, I sure hope so. Rwanda says, you were too quiet. Ivan says, really? Anyway, it's surprising. It seems like everyone else knows you better than you know yourself. Rwanda says, just what do you know about me, huh? Ivan says, well, just make sure you don't get grabbed by the yard. You should be a bit worried. Rwanda says, me? What crimes could I be arrested for exactly? Rwanda says, since I've come back, I haven't finished a single person. I'm just a regular citizen, aren't I? Ivan says, I'll give your ignorant face one warning. There are some troublesome blokes in this town. First, the frighteningly competent assistant inspector named Benjamin Holt. If that guy spots you, consider yourself done. You'll never be able to get his eyes off your back. Then there's the problem child, Eric Harris. He's a young detective, but he's bad news. Fierce, you could call him the embodiment of wrath. Rwanda says, how interesting. I'd like to meet him. Meanwhile, down in the streets, someone was robbing a lady. Hearing him, Eric says, later, and jumps out of the window and lands on the man. Then he says to the lady, target secured. Get yourself somewhere safe. The man says, damn it, from above? Eric says, holding a gun. Stop acting like a child or I'll blow your head off. Seeing the gun, the man says, what? Christ, aren't you that detective? Why do you have such a thing? Eric says, this gun is my best friend. Let me introduce. He shots, saying, this is for that woman. He shots again, saying, and this is for everything you've done till now. As he handcuffs the man, Eric says, you're under arrest for extortion as well as suspicions of murder. The man says, you're crazy. How could someone like you be an officer? Eric says, I wonder? You might have a point, but I am protecting the public and its citizens. Vermin like you are the ones at fault here. Meanwhile, over at Scotland Yard, the officer Yano says, it's about Detective Harris. He has once again struck out by himself and located, arrested, and jailed a gang member. Inspector Holt says, what do you want me to do about it? Would seem like he is working quite hard then. Better than someone leaving on vacation during these troubling times. Officer Yano says, however, Detective Harris's vigilantism is too conspicuous. We're going to have to temporarily suspend him. Inspector Holt says, do you mean house arrest? Then who will cover the investigations? Officer Yano says, someone else will take over. He's a nuisance to everybody. Holt, Inspector Holt says, pardon. However, I would kindly request you to refrain from punishing Harris, please. Inspector Holt bows and says, I will make sure he takes the utmost caution. So, would you mind overlooking this incident? If nothing else, for my sake. Officer Yano says, Detective Harris has done nothing but hold you back, hasn't he? I don't want to waste any more time and effort on cases such as the one in the East End. I don't want to waste yours either. You're needed elsewhere. Inspector Holt says, such as? Officer Yano says, why did you refuse your promotion? Inspector Holt says, a person such as me just isn't fit to be the inspector at Central. As Holt leaves Yano's office, he says, nothing but refusal from him. Meanwhile, as Holt came out, he says, I have no idea what's going on in his head. Such a mysterious man. Meanwhile, Rwanda was having a fight with another man. The man says, bloody hell, why can't I get a solid hit on you? Rwanda says, is this all you got, Gramps? Come on now. Come and get me. Let's keep it going. Kathy says, he was protecting me from being harassed, but now he's just enjoying it at this point, isn't he? Ivan says, seems like it. Just then, he notices Eric and says, no way, wait, if Eric is here, doesn't that mean? I didn't notice. Just then, Inspector Holt steps forward and says, I'm an officer. Let's prevent this from becoming a bigger disturbance than it is, okay? As the man says, policeman? I don't know what. Ivan says, this is bad. Just please don't do anything stupid, Rwanda. Meanwhile, Rwanda goes over to Inspector Holt and says, excuse me, you really didn't need to protect me there. Inspector Holt says, if I was protecting anyone, it was that man. Then he says, let's head out, little Airy. Eric says, that was awesome, Inspector. As they leave, Ivan says, scolding, Rwanda, don't you remember a thing I said to you? Those guys are with the Yard. Rwanda says, how lucky we met them. Does the fact they came here just mean they got finished with their work? Or rather, are they tracking a suspect of the devilish Ripper? Ivan runs off saying, I'm going to see where they went. stay here with Kathy. But Rwanda also runs off saying, sorry, Kathy, I gotta go, as Kathy calls out, huh? Rwanda? As Ivan stops, he says to himself, I lost sight of them. Remembering about Rwanda, Ivan was going to run back, but he sees Rwanda asking a lady, are you all right? Where's the culprit? The woman says, he ran in that direction. As Ivan says, this guy, in the end, he came anyway. As Rwanda helps her, he says, you're not injured. The woman says, yes, thank you for your help. As Rwanda was going to leave, Ivan recognizes the lady and says, Makalo? As Rwanda stops, he hears Ivan say, why are you dressed like a harlot? Makalo says, Ivan, there's a good reason. Rwanda recalls, saying, Makalo, this is bad. She can see my face. This girl, to think she was still alive. Just then, Ivan says, oi, what's up? Then Ivan sees Rwanda is about to attack Makalo, so he says, oh, damn. Stop! Don't do it! Rwanda was about to slay Makalo. As on the other side, Inspector Holt says, just now, didn't you hear a scream? Eric says, huh? Number. In my day, I've seen a countless number of murderers. Inspector Holt says, recalling Rwanda, that man, we're going back. I have a bad feeling about this. Meanwhile, as Ivan says, don't do it. Makalo gets confused as she doesn't know Rwanda was behind her. So she says, don't do it? I'm telling you, there's a reason for this getup. You don't need to shout like that. Just then, they hear running footsteps. So Ivan says, for now, let's just get moving. As Eric and Holt reach the place, Eric says, what? There ain't even anybody here. Holt says, must have been imagining things. Pardon me. As Rwanda and Ivan reach a bar, Ivan says, introducing my acquaintance, Makalo, a newspaper reporter. This here is Rwanda. He's an old co-worker of mine. Makalo smiles and says, nice to meet you, Rwanda. Pleasure. As Rwanda says, pleasure's mine. He says in his mind, nice to meet you? Does she not recognize me? Ivan says, so why exactly are you dressing like a tramp? Don't tell me it's 'cause of the devilish Ripper. Makalo says, yes, that's right. I wanted to try and persuade him to stop any further wrongdoing. Ivan scolds, saying, you moron, he's just gonna kill you. Rwanda says, why are you willing to go so far to put yourself in danger? Makalo says, when I was a child, both my parents were murdered terribly. Rwanda insists, by whom? Makalo says, I'm not sure. I can't remember much from that time. Rwanda says, I see. So that's how it is. Ivan says, so that's why you want to stop him at all costs. But you can't be so reckless. Got it? Makalo says, yeah, I got it. Back home, Ivan says, oi, Rwanda, are you a human or are you a devil? Rwanda says, I'd say I'm a human. Ivan says, gripping the curtain, so you say. You really believe those words? Next time you think about raising a hand against Makalo, I'll dispose of you myself. Rwanda says, I'd like to avoid such a fate. Then he says in his mind, I should get another gun. Also, 3 or so knives should probably do the trick. As he was standing near the window, something comes in from the window. As it blows, Rwanda says, a bomb? When on earth did they? Just then, Rwanda sees a figure holding a brick ready to attack him. Then he faints out. As Rwanda gains consciousness, he sees he's in a room with another man, and as he smells something, he says, this is, and vomits. Suddenly he notices and says, my vision. Everything's blurry. There's something on my arm. A bug? Or not? Needle marks? These symptoms. White powder. What a mess. Don't tell me he injected me with something else. Suddenly the man attacks, saying, you are a bad one. You're after me, aren't you? I can tell. Finish. I'll finish you. As Rwanda says, wait, the man says, once I finish you, I'll be able to get out of this place. Rwanda again says, wait, I don't know who you are. Finally, Rwanda manages to slay the man, but before he could react, someone grabs him from behind. Rwanda sees it's the devilish Ripper and faints again. As Rwanda regains consciousness, he sees he's tied to the wall, and Kathy is unconscious in front of him. Seeing her, Rwanda calls out, Kathy. Devilish Ripper says, don't worry, she's only unconscious. Rwanda pleads, please don't finish her. Devilish Ripper says, that depends on you. The truth is, I was thinking I would like to have a conversation with you. I have things I'd like to ask you. I know you're not doing so well, so I'll keep things brief. First question, why do you finish people? Rwanda says in his mind, I guess there's no point in lying. So he says, my mother, to be able to protect my mother. Why do you? Devilish Ripper says, I have not been finishing anyone. I am simply eradicating vermin. Those tramps are the blighted root of the evil infesting our world. Rwanda says, hump. You resent these women for some reason, don't you? Devilish Ripper says, second question, what happens when you get angry? Rwanda says, I don't know. I don't understand myself. So, I wanted to come meet you. Devilish Ripper says, that's an unexpected answer, Mr. Bailey. As Rwanda says in his mind, he knows me? Devilish Ripper says, so you don't know? Well then let's find out. He takes hold of Kathy. Rwanda says, stop it. Devilish Ripper says, I apologize for getting someone so precious to you tied up in all this. Rwanda says, I haven't hidden anything from you, yes. So right, let's just talk more. We can have some fun. Devilish Ripper says, just what is fun for a finisher, Mr. Bailey? Rwanda says, no, I've changed. That girl's everything I have. Do anything, just don't finish her. Please. Kathy looks at Rwanda and says, Rwanda? Rwanda says, desperate, I have no choice but to see things through. Devilish Ripper says, there is no reversing. This girl sins. This is the road she chose. Rwanda says, do you hate me? Devilish Ripper says, perhaps you understand somewhat then. How I feel. As Kathy fell to the ground, Rwanda's mind began seeing images, and he began to say, how dare you finish them? How dare you? He recalls when Miranda said, well done, Rwanda. He recalled when Will said, grown-ups can be good people. He recalled Raj saying, devil. He recalled calling out, wait, mother. As she left him and the day she died, he said, mother, don't leave me, mother. Just then, Devilish Ripper gets hit on his head as Makalo comes running and says, he's here, this way. The police run after Devilish Ripper, saying, hold it. Seeing Rwanda, Makalo says, Rwanda, are you okay? I'll get you out. Are you feeling okay? Is the cool air helping at all? I'm sorry. If only I had arrived sooner. Makalo continues, saying, don't worry, you're not alone. I'm right here with you. Rwanda looks at Makalo and sees Kathy's face. Then he says, I'm sorry, and gets up and jumps into the sea. As Rwanda fell into the water, Makalo calls hysterically, Rwanda! The officer says, what on earth are you doing? Makalo says, let me go. I have to help him. Rwanda! After a few days back at home, Makalo says, we haven't been able to find him since. Ivan says, it'll be okay. Knowing him, he's still alive. More importantly, how did you know where the killer would be? Makalo says, showing a letter. The other day, a letter that's thought to be from the killer arrived at the newspaper. Before we printed the letter in the newspaper, I approached that officer with the idea of trading information. I leaked contents of the letter to Detective Harris. In exchange, he provided the location of where the killer was expected to appear. Makalo recalls saying, Eric told her, any sort of in-depth investigation is going to be highly dangerous. I'll secure a guard detail for you. Makalo recalled she told Eric, thank you. May I ask what made you decide to work with me? Eric said, rather than my appearance or position, I would prefer to catch the culprit and end this as soon as possible. The more allies, the better. Makalo tells Ivan, we teamed up with the understanding that we wanted to make the murderer atone for his crimes. Ivan says, I see. Then he says in his mind, sorry to say that won't be a possibility since I'm going to end his life myself, but I'd like to avoid exposing myself as a hitman if I can. For her sake too. Then Ivan says, I'll check a couple of places Rwanda might have ended up. Makalo, you just focus on investigating the killer. Makalo says, that's wonderful. Thank you. Let me know if you want to discuss. Ivan says, helping out a good friend ain't nothing but common sense, ain't it? Makalo says, yes. Meanwhile, in a restaurant, a man named Kibi says, the police have been continuing their investigation. Earlier, the culprit's appearance and base of operations had yet remained unknown. Another man, Maniwa, says, however, as of this report, the culprit still remains at large. Meanwhile, out on the street, two men were talking as one of them says, you gotta be the murderer, aren't you? The other one says, you a suspicious one yourself. You were complaining about tramps just earlier today, weren't you? As the fight was escalating, Inspector Holt says, a mere suit jacket is not worth fighting over. Meanwhile, over at the morgue, the autopsy head says, that's it for the autopsy report. As usual, a gruesome sight, that's all I can say. This is the fourth one now. Give me a break, would you? I can't enjoy my dinner anymore. Eric bends down, saying, damn it, we've been searching high and low every day. This investigation is like scouring the land for a single hair. And even then we haven't found any clues whatsoever. Inspector Holt says, holding an image other than this mask. Eric says, you've seen everything the newspapers are stirring up. They're ridiculing us. Holt says, this could be the time. There may need to be a change in the police. Detective Harris, there are times when it can be important to cut losses. I heard directly from the Superintendent General. We'll be transferring this case over to Central. Eric says, no way. Holt says, the lack of results we've had, it means the case is no longer in our hands. Eric says, I refuse to give up now. Holt says, do you mean, and just what, exactly? Eric says, just what, it doesn't matter the reason. Holt says in his mind, I myself am the real finisher, so investigating any further is meaningless. Would you understand if I said that? As Holt tells Eric, Eric says, shocked, sir, you're kidding, right? Holt says, yes, I'm kidding. Eric says, relaxed. Oh man, geez, don't scare me like that. Holt says, however, little Airy, I've been thinking. Stopping the finisher is not our true goal. The cause of the incidents is something that exists on a deeper level. Why did this individual commit such crimes? Societal trends, personal history, personality, interpersonal relationships, ideology, justice, values, even human nature. If we want to resolve this issue, we ought to search for this origin. Although, as long as we keep our prejudiced views, we'll never be able to find the truth. As Holt leaves, Eric says, Inspector, he sure is acting a bit strange. Just then, Eric gets a note and says, a clue for the murderer? Is he trying to let me take credit for this? Classic Inspector. I should have known. As Holt walks away, he says, Eric, Seeing you reminds me of the days of my youth. I too, no. I turned my back on this organization a long time ago. Meanwhile, as Mikalo meets Eric, Eric says, "So you're telling me we're missing a key person now?" Eric says, "I have made a spot of progress myself." As he hands the note to Mikalo, Mikalo reads it, saying, "Tavistock High Walredden? That's pretty far away." Eric says, "Given the location, it's probably not the place he commits his crimes. It's likely it serves as his personal hideout." Then he says in his mind, recalling Holt's behavior, "That was a different inspector's normal candor. It could be, if he can't get the finisher to comply, he's planning to finish him." Then Eric says, "I'm going to head out to investigate. I'll let you know what I find." As Eric was leaving, Mikalo says, "I'll also," but Eric says, "I can't expose a civilian to possible danger." Meanwhile, as Eric was standing in front of a mansion holding a gun, Mikalo, who had followed him, says, "Even with everything, I'm still a journalist, you know." As Eric enters the mansion, weapons keep attacking him. As he stops, he says, "Damn it, there are traps everywhere. I didn't hear anything about this. It seems the finisher has some familiarity with traps? No, with this many of them. There's a good chance we're dealing with more than one criminal. The only place I haven't checked is the basement. At this rate, though, it's probably not going to have any clues. Could be empty." Meanwhile, as Mikalo enters, she triggers a trap and falls into the door. As she falls, someone catches her. Seeing who it is, Mikalo says, "Ivan, what are you doing here?" Ivan says, "I got worried, so I came after you." "Sorry." Mikalo says, "Geez, I'm doing fine. Well, I'm still living and breathing thanks to you." Meanwhile, Eric finds a table full of blood and says, "This." Then he finds a bottle and smells it, saying, "Oil?" As he was holding the mask in his hand, he says, "Don't tell me." As he was going to run out, Devilish Ripper comes in front of him and attacks him, as Eric says, "Don't fool with me." As Eric takes a close look at the Devilish Ripper, he says, "Damn you. So you're the finisher? My next shot won't miss." As Eric shoots, he says, "Son of a damn, this has got to be a joke." As Eric falls to the ground, hurt, he says, "Why did you leave me the note about this place? Did you bring me here to die?" Number seeing Devilish Ripper is Inspector Holt. Eric says, "Truthfully, it was because you wanted me to catch you, didn't you, Inspector?" Meanwhile, Ivan and Mikalo hear the blast. So Mikalo goes running as Ivan calls out, "Hold up, stop, that's not safe." Seeing the fire, Mikalo says, "No way." Seeing the fire, Mikalo says, "Aren't we on the second floor right now? This means we can't take the stairs." Ivan says, "Don't worry, it'll be okay." As Ivan looks down the window, he says, "We can make this. We're going to jump out." He takes hold of Mikalo and jumps out of the window. Meanwhile, as the officers were investigating, a junior officer says, "We've been dealing with a lot of arson lately. Nearly everything in this room has been charred to a crisp. The only thing that looks like potential evidence would be that mask you got your hands on. It's a shame." Eric says, recalling Holt, "It's not a shame. Some important information was burned into my vision this day. We already have the evidence we need. We're close to settling this." Meanwhile, as Rwanda wakes up, Will says, "Oh, you're awake? It's been a while." Rwanda, seeing Will, Rwanda says, shocked, "Will?" Rwanda says, "So you were still alive." Will says, "After that day, I quit my job at the orphanage and started working at the local hospital. Every so often, I'd end up doing a job as a back alley doctor. It seems I've turned out to be quite the splendid criminal." Rwanda says, "You haven't shared anything about me to anyone, have you?" As Will says, "I haven't." Rwanda says, "Are you dense? You'd do such a thing without having anything to gain from it? Not to mention you saved my life. Didn't it occur to finish me instead?" Will says, "Rwanda, you are simply a single person and I would like to understand, without bias." Rwanda looks at Will and says in his mind, "He's changed. Well, he appears harmless for the moment. Should be okay to leave him be." As Rwanda was leaving, Will says, "You're leaving?" Rwanda says, "I have some loose ends to tie up." Meanwhile, as Eric comes to the bar, seeing Holt hasn't come, he says, "He didn't show up today either." As Eric was sitting alone, he says in his mind, "Was everything a lie? No? There's got to be something else. Why would he be killing tramps? Until I can see him face to face, I'm going to choose to believe in the inspector. After all, I still want to trust him." Just then, a woman screams, saying, "No, stay away." As the Devilish Ripper was going to slay the woman, Rwanda comes over saying, "Heya." And as he attacks Devilish Ripper, Rwanda says, "Consider that payback for earlier." Soon, Ivan also joins them and was about to slay Devilish Ripper, but Rwanda stops, saying, "Hold on, I have some final questions for him. So, just what were you finishing all those tramps for? You can tell me, can't you? Before you're gone forever, tell me why you did all this." Holt says, "I once held respect for my father, a very faithful and honorable man, but after the death of my mother, he became peculiar. I seldom saw him around. One day he came back, so I called him Daddy, but he was only looking for cash. Just what in the world could make my father like this, I wondered. I followed him. The scene I discovered there was gut-wrenching. This was a nest of devils, leading men astray into poverty and ruin. Demons are just a figment. People are the true demons." As Rwanda looks shocked, Holt says, "My reason. This was my justice or something. The evils of the world are escaping judgment from the law. They've saturated this world to its core. I mean, my plan was, after all, just personal feelings. You may see them as lovers, but in my eyes, they will bring ruin to all of humanity. I know my reasons. No matter how much of an unfeeling machine I become, as long as I am human, I can't fully rid myself of these emotions. Holt says to Rwanda, "You felt the same back there. Descendants of the Baileys. Now then, if you desire to finish me, then finish me. One way or another, I was planning to pay for my crimes." Just then, Eric calls out, "Inspector." As the fog was thickening, he says, "Damn, this fog is too thick. I can't see a thing." Just then, Ivan pulls the trigger as Rwanda says, "I was still talking." Ivan says, "You heard what he said. This conversation is over." Ivan grabs Rwanda and says, "Listen, this is just the beginning. You will have more confrontations in the future. There are more finishers you will meet besides me. Then, you will see the endless abyss of finishers. You have already dipped your foot into this bottomless pit. It won't end here." Rwanda says, "How can you say that for sure?" Ivan says, "At your very core you wish to know, you can't resist your instincts." Just then, Eric calls out, "Inspector!" and shoots at Rwanda. As Rwanda gets shot at, he says, "Ivan, that fool. Where did he run off to? For now, I need to move." Meanwhile, as Ivan was hiding, he says, "Sorry, Rwanda." As Eric says, "Halt." But Rwanda manages to run away. Then, as Eric comes over to Holt, he says, "Inspector, damn it." 2 weeks later, as Makala was looking at her parents' photo, she says, "Forever obsessing over revenge won't do me any good. I know this," but as Makala was offering her wishes to her parents, Rwanda, who came for Kathy, comes over saying, "Oh ho, what a coincidence." As they go to a restaurant, Makalo says, "I knew Kathy from a good while back. She often helped me collect information for stories. After all this, the culprit still hasn't been found. I was hoping we could find the finisher to honor his victims, but there is also a part of me that thinks it's better he's never found." Rwanda says, "And why isn't that?" Makalo says, "If we identify the culprit, it will just end up stoking fires of revenge." Rwanda says, "I see. Have you been contemplating revenge against the finisher that finished your parents?" As Makalo says, "What? That?" She ends up breaking the glass in her hands and says, "Sorry." Then Makalo says, "To be frank, if I was ever to find the person who took my parents' lives, I have no clue what I would do. Right now, too, it's like I lose control of myself. I have to go. Pardon me." As Makalo leaves, Rwanda says, "See you again, Makalo." As Rwanda leaves, he says, "What a nonchalant goodbye." Ivan, who was outside, says, "So where are you going to head next?" Rwanda says, "You want to know?" Ivan says, "If you're planning to get carried away by the devilish Ripper's words, stop right now. Do you intend to take a one-way ride to hell? Even if you aren't, things are going to get rough for you. It's looking like the cops are planning to pin you as the finisher." Rwanda says, "Back there, that detective showed up at just the right moment. He was able to see my face. Perhaps you had a part to play in figuring out the culprit." Ivan says, "So what if I did?" Rwanda says, "It's fine." Ivan says, "Fine?" Rwanda says, "Truth be told, no matter how cruel I may be, from here on out, regardless of whatever danger I run into, humanity is a game. You have to try and have fun with it, you know? Would you care to come with?" Ivan says, Moron. I ain't going. I'm not about to join up with the finisher. And I got paid quite a bit of money. This is where our journey ends." Rwanda says, "Well, I'll always be waiting for you." Rwanda takes the train to a new place, a new life. If you enjoy this video, please like and subscribe.